Okay. Good evening. So today's topics are inflation, budget, taxing, and unemployment. Okay, so these are the four areas. I hope you have checked it once. Okay, so then it will be easy. Right. Okay, see here. So in inflation and prelims, what are the questions they can ask? So one is application-based questions. I'll show you some questions of the previous years. So that is basically application-based questions, right? Second is it can be terminology. So disinflation, deflation. Okay, so that is one. Three, it can be with respect to CPI and WPI. CPI, WPI, and their weightages. I'll show you that question also, which has been asked in CDS 2024. So recently, they've asked a question on WPI index and on the weightages. So these are the three areas. So there will not be any other question. There will not be any other question other than these. So, or there can be an application-based question. Application-based question should be something like bringing in monetary policy, fiscal policy, and terms like recession, Great Depression, and all that, and putting it in inflation. So these are the only areas where the question will come. There can't be any other area. There can't be any other area where the question will be asked. Simple. Is this clear? Okay, so whether it is CDS, whether it is UPSC. So now this chart is basically talking about that in India. Of course, there was a prelims question last year, which was an assertion and reasoning based question. Okay, so they've asked, really, that is something like, there was something like a monetary tightening across the globe. Okay, and they have confidence with respect to the monetary policy. That is something related to linking up monetary policy and inflation. They have linked up monetary policy and inflation, right? Okay, now see here, this is something like, I've used a word called pent-up demand here. So when I use the word pent-up demand, it is something like demand that is getting created after there is a slump in consumption. There is a fall in consumption during COVID, and then after that, there is a revival. That is what is called as pent-up demand. Last year, they have not asked. This year, suppose if they are going to ask, you will mark it. Okay, so here, this is a diagram which shows like just after COVID problem, inflation increased across the globe. And the reason is not only because of demand pull reasons, but also because of cost push. So this is what the chart talks about here. So lockdown was there. Government and RBI were following expansionary policy, whether it is fiscal or expansionary monetary policy. Since there was uncertainty, though they have come up with expansionary policies, there was low pent-up demand. That means people were not spending money, they were saving. Okay, but after the restrictions were removed, suddenly people started spending crazy. That is basically they started increasing their consumption. So this has created a gap between demand and supply. Demand and supply means demand graph started shifting rightward. Okay, and because of which prices increased, and that is nothing but demand pull inflation. But along with that, there was Russian war situation. China was following zero COVID policy. So because of these reasons, supply side constraints were also there. So because of that, there was cost push inflation or supply side inflation as well. So demand pull, cost push together has pushed inflation to a greater extent. Not just India, US, developed countries like Turkey, there was inflation rate of 80%. Okay, so which is a very high rate. Okay, so this is one observation here. From here, there was a question asked. So across the globe, inflation rates were high. So advanced economies, the blue one you can see there. So advanced economies also, the inflation went almost like 7.2. Advanced economies, the inflation rates are generally 1.52 or maybe like 2% to 1.4, 1.5. This is the ideal rate for them, but they have touched 7.2. And emerging economies touched almost like 9.9. So what is inflation? Inflation is a rate of increase of prices. In economics, the basic definition of inflation is rate of increase of prices. Okay, so now is inflation always bad? Definitely not. Inflation is good, and if inflation is too high, then it is bad. So which inflation is good? So we use a word called creeping inflation, which is good. So for an economy to keep moving, you need something like a creeping inflation. If you know the supply graph, okay, the supplier always supplies more material at higher prices. Supply graph. Okay, so supplier always supplies more material. So that means if there is no increase in prices, then the supplier may not supply material. Simple. The supply stops. Okay, so that is the reason creeping inflation is always required. 2 to 3% of inflation rate is always good for the economy. Nothing wrong in that. Okay, and then we have something like walking inflation. Walking is around 3 to 10%, and for India, it is up to 6 is okay. So our target is 4 plus or minus 2 consumer price index. Is that okay? So then when we use a word galloping inflation is 10 to 50%, which is high. Obviously, which is high. So galloping, if you are not controlling galloping inflation, it becomes hyperinflation. Every month it jumps around 50%. So Zimbabwe had problems, they had to change their currency altogether. So this is called as hyperinflation. Now the question is, out of inflation and deflation, okay, so if I have to put a chart here, if this is the zero line, okay, so this is a basic chart. Okay, so this is nothing but in deflation. This is reflation. This is inflation. Inflation. And this is disinflation. This one chart will talk about all these words. Okay, so deflation is fall in prices, which is dangerous. And deflation is always bad for the economy. And deflation is always associated with job losses. Deflation is always associated with job losses. Inflation may or may not be associated with job losses. If inflation is associated with job losses, we use a word called stagflation. Got the point? So another word here is stagflation. Stagflation. So it is nothing but inflation along with problems of unemployment. That is nothing but stagflation. But deflation, you will find job losses associated with. If you have to understand today, Japan, UK, all are facing recession. Okay, and US is also in recession. In fact, US never announces, but US is also in recession. So negative growth for 2 quarters and above. Okay, and that means the globe is not. China was facing problems of deflation. China was facing problems of deflation. But India, luckily, currently we are only talking about controlling what? Inflation. So is inflation always bad? If a statement comes up like inflation is always bad for the economy, it is wrong. A decent amount of inflation, which is creeping inflation, is good. For India, up to 4% is doable for us right now. So if once it crosses 4, we see that walking inflation is going up. It may become galloping, and from galloping, it will become hyper. Hyper is dangerous. Currency values and all will go down. Is that okay? Now the question here is, deflation is fall in prices. Disinflation is what? Fall in the inflation rate. But the prices are positive here. But there is a fall in inflation rate. Reflation is what? After there is deflation, when the prices are increasing. Okay, so whenever there is this kind of situation, there will be fiscal stimulus or monetary stimulus done by the governments. I'll show you those questions of previous UPSC. So fiscal stimulus is one. Government is pumping money. So in 2010, there was a question on this word fiscal stimulus. So government is pumping money into the economy to revive the economy which is not doing well. That is what is fiscal. Government is pumping. So it can be through increasing public expenditure. So that can be through increasing public expenditure. Government is pumping money. It can be by reducing tax rates. Or government can also come up with bailout packages. Bailing out companies which are not doing well. You're pumping money from your budget, and you're bailing out companies which are not doing well. All this is fiscal stimulus. And fiscal stimulus can lead to what? Obviously, it will lead to inflation. Okay, so that is the reason we need to be careful when you are following something like counter-cyclical and cyclical policy. So there's counter-cyclical. So government comes up with counter-cyclical policies countering the cycles of the economy. Counter-cyclical is what? Countering the cycles of the economy. So here if you see, when our growth is going down, so we use a word called slowdown. So in slowdown is different from recession. Slowdown is something like fall in the growth rates. Recession is something like negative growth. There's a difference between slowdown and negative growth, right? Okay, so here suppose GDP is going down, fiscal stimulus. So you're increasing the fiscal stimulus. You're pumping more money. That is counter-cyclical, countering the cycles of the economy. But the problem is, when the growth is good and still you follow cyclical policy here. That means here the GDP is doing well and still you're following cyclical policy. GDP is good and still you're following fiscal stimulus. That can be inflationary. That is not good. Counter-cyclical, cyclical. I think it is clear. So from this chart, there was one simple question that was asked last year, which was easy. Assertion and reason-based question. Okay, so that's not a difficult question. I'll come to that question. This is not CDS, this is UPSC questions, prelims question only. So if you see here, with reference to Indian economy, consider the following statements. Okay, so this is the question. If the inflation is too high, RBI is likely to buy government securities. No. Buy means money supply will increase. Simple. Money supply will increase, demand pull inflation, right? So first statement is wrong. And therefore, I know the answer. Got the point. This is how UPSC prelims was, except last year. But last year, if you see, 75 is the cutoff. So there's no tension. If you have a cool mind, you can get that 75, provided you clear CSAT. That cutoff was basically because of CSAT only. Okay, so fine. Is this okay till here? So now, see, if the rupee is rapidly depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollars in the market. Rupee is depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollar. More dollars, dollar value will come down and rupee will appreciate. Okay, and interest rates in US or European Union were to fall, that is likely to induce RBI to buy dollars. Obviously, because dollar is available cheaper. Simple. That is when you buy. Is that okay? Yes. A simple question here. So demand pull inflation, when I use the word demand pull inflation is nothing but too much of money is chasing too few goods. Okay, so of course yesterday, see some topics, like I said, find out elastic supply, and some students were saying like, sir, this is something like difficult, etc. So nothing is going to happen if we see like elastic supply goes this way. Tomorrow if it comes, we will mark, otherwise it's okay. It's not to reduce your confidence. Got this? Keep this in mind. So this is like some extra thing we are seeing from CDS or something is something like, oh, if it repeats, we will mark it. If you have not understood, leave it. It's not going to come in the exam. That's how you should leave it, no? You should decide like it's not going to come in the exam. Like, that's how you decide. Okay, so now see, overheating of Indian economy. There's this word that is given in your material also. Overheating means there is too much of money that is moving, and demand, there is a lot of excess demand, and supply is not matching the demand. Supply is not matching the demand. Overheating. So that means you will find that the demand graph is shifting. Okay, but the supply is not matching the demand, then automatically there will be increase in prices. The price will start jumping. It slowly starts shifting. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, fine. See here. With reference to Indian economy, demand pull inflation can be increased by which of the following? UPSC question only. Okay, so expansionary policies, see here, rising interest rates. So it will reduce the money supply. So automatically, if you remove 5, you get the answer. So UPSC earlier was very kind. This is 2 years back, I think. Is this clear? So rising interest rates will reduce money supply. So reduce money supply means demand pull inflation is going to decrease. So that means this is an easy question. Fiscal stimulus. So the learning here is fiscal stimulus, expansionary policies All will lead to what? Demand pull, inflation. Okay. And what is the answer for this question then? So 1, 2, and 4, higher purchasing power. That means you don't have inflation indexing wages. This is the learning basically. So the learning from this question is inflation indexing wage. So that is not there in the answer. This is what is your observation. That means this word comes up back again tomorrow. That means this is not leading to demand pull inflation. This is what is observation. Okay, so inflation indexing wage means what? Your wages are linked to inflation. Okay, so that means inflation is increasing, your wage is also increasing, but both are ultimately they are coming zeroing down. Okay, so there's nothing like increase in your purchasing power. You will have the same purchasing power. Are you able to get this? You are in, that is the reason. That is the reason it is not inflationary. Inflationary indexing wage. So that means my inflation, my wages are linked to inflation. So my purchasing power is not going to reduce, but my purchasing power is not going to increase as well. So no demand pull inflation. Hope it is clear. So this is the observation from this question. Okay, so this is about inflation index bonds. So what is the meaning of an inflation index bond is? So first of all, inflation goes against creditors and bondholders or bondholders. Inflation, so this you should be knowing already, there's a previous question. Okay, so inflation goes against, inflation will take away money from creditors to debtors. This is what you should understand. Inflation will take away money from creditor to debtor. Okay, so creditor can be bondholder. Bondholder is a creditor. Okay, so and bond issuer would be debtor. Somebody who's issuing the bond is the debtor, and creditor is somebody who's buying the bond, who's holding the bond, bondholder. Inflation will go against creditor. This is a very common concept. So therefore, to support the bondholders, RBI earlier came up with these bonds called as inflation index bonds. So these bonds, the principal amount which you pay along with the interest which you receive, both are indexed to inflation. Both are indexed to inflation. So both are indexed to inflation means inflation is increasing, you will get a higher return. That's it. You will get a higher return, principal also, as well as interest. That means as a bond holder, you will not lose. Simple. Okay. So WPI plus 1.5% initially. That is how they have linked it. WPI is an index, wholesale price index, because 80% of these inflation index bonds are were for wholesalers, and 20% were released by RBI for retailers. These bonds were also maintained as part of SLR related security. That means for banks, banks are buying these bonds, they can also show them as SLR related security, G6. Okay, so they can show it as part of their SLR related security. Okay, so now see here, inflation index bonds provide protection to investors from uncertainty regarding inflation, no problem. The interest received as well as capital gains on IIBs are non-taxable. This is wrong. So anything you're getting a gain, etc., it is taxed. Okay, in the infrastructure class, I will talk about infrastructure InvITs. Last year prelims, there was a question on InvITs. So whatever you generate from InvITs also is taxed by the government. That was a question last year prelims. Okay, IIBs, the return you get is taxed. There's nothing like any benefit they're going to give you. Is that okay? In terms of tax concession, is that okay? And then government can reduce the coupon rates on its borrowing by way of IIB. So whenever a bond is issued, along with the bond, a coupon is announced. Suppose 100 rupees bond is released and 10 rupees is the coupon. That means I'll pay you 10 rupees every quarter. So 10 rupees is the coupon. Since they are indexed to inflation, so with less coupon also, you will be buying the bond. I think you got my point right. I need not offer a higher coupon. So when I'm saying 100 rupees is the bond, I need not give you 20 rupees coupon. Okay, 10 rupees also you are okay. That means with less coupon also, the buyers may buy the bond because you are hedged against inflation. You don't have the risk of inflation, and therefore government can come up with a lesser coupon and still raise money. RBI can come up with a lesser coupon and still raise money. I think, is this clear? Okay, so is that okay? Concept is clear, right? So this is not CDS, and you can't feel this is difficult question. This is UPSC question only. Okay, so, and you should know what is a coupon. I think coupon is clear. Okay. Done. Now we'll get into our material. Okay. Now, is that clear till here? Okay, so now move into the material now. So when I talk about different types of inflation, okay, so we talk about demand pull, cost push, and structural. So structural would be obviously long term, isn't it? Because it has a lot of supply bottlenecks, etc. So long term. Okay, so increase in indirect taxes will lead to which inflation? Cost push. Increase in indirect taxes will lead to which inflation? Cost push inflation. It is increasing the cost of the product, simple. Okay, reduction in direct taxes will lead to which inflation? Demand pull. Okay, less direct taxes means you'll have more money in hand, more money supply. So demand pull inflation. I hope it is clear. There's no confusion there. So these are the questions. That is how they are going to ask you. Okay, so reduction in repo rates, SLR, CRR, MSF, all will lead to what? Demand pull inflation. High GST rates will lead to cost push inflation. Supply side constraints, infrastructure problems, etc. will again lead to cost push, and it can also be structural. So structural can be because of some problems, fluctuations due to seasonal and cyclical reasons, infrastructure, cartelization, cement cartels. Is that okay? So that is different types of inflation. Here, of course, there are 3 types, but you should be knowing there is something like walking, running. Okay, so but I don't think they'll ask specifically, but hyper is bad. From walking, it is bad. Which is the best one? Best is what? Creeping. And this creeping for India will be different. Okay, so and gallop and walking for India will be different. So 6% for is something like, okay, something which we can manage. But for US, 6 will be at a higher level. So 4.5 itself is high for US, because India is a growing economy. Previous question, which of the following is associated with a growing economy? This was a previous UPSC question. Inflation, deflation, disinflation, stagflation. Answer, inflation. That's a previous UPSC simple question that they've already asked. Okay, so now impact of inflation. So here there can be some questions. What would be the impact of inflation on, suppose I ask you, impact of inflation on creditors or bond holders? Positive or negative? Negative. Okay. What about impact of inflation on informal workers? Negative, obviously. They can't negotiate. Okay, so they can't negotiate. No, they can't say inflation is increasing, increase my salary. We will replace them. Simple logic. So that is the reason it will go against informal workers. I hope it is clear. Simple, there's no confusion here. Is that okay? So inflation goes against informal workers. And high inflation with respect to currency can reduce the value of currency. Reduce the value. Currency value will depreciate. Okay, so too much of inflation can have a negative impact on currency values. Okay, so now imports impacts exports. Costlier goods discourages foreign importers. Obviously, your goods are becoming costly, then automatically nobody is going to buy. Then the export also is going to decrease. Simple. So there's no much of difficulty there. It also impacts imports, cheaper imported goods. So it's better that you buy imports from outside India. Okay, therefore our imports may increase. It is always may. You can't say will. It may increase. Okay, so that is something which you'll remember. Adverse impact on foreign exchange. Okay, so this is something like very simple. There should not be any confusion here with respect to inflation. Is that okay? And whenever Federal Bank is going to increase its interest rates, Will it have any impact on our inflation? Yes, Federal Bank is increasing interest rates means dollar is becoming stronger. Dollar supply will decrease. Dollar supply is less means dollar will become stronger, and therefore I need to pay more rupees to buy the dollar. So if rupee value depreciates, my imports will become costly. So therefore, it can have a negative impact with respect to my inflation. It can create problems with respect to inflation. Is that okay? So that is something like, so that is the reason whenever Federal Bank is increasing interest rates, RBI will say, we will not reduce the rates. Okay, RBI is not reducing the rates in the bi-monthly monetary policy review. They're not reducing the rates. Breeds corruption, black marketing, hoarding, okay, and increases fiscal deficit and creates unequal distribution of income because the poor man will get more affected. So inflation will always act like a tax. That is called as inflation tax. There's nothing like an inflation tax. So what is inflation tax? Inflation is acting like a tax because it is taking away money from me. But what is inflation tax? Is that okay? It's simple. Okay, so measures to curb inflation. So one is the monetary measures. Now, then you have the fiscal measures and administrative measures. Okay, so three types of measures to handle inflation. So every time there is one or the other question which is asked, which is simple, you can identify. Okay, so now here if you see monetary measures can be with respect to these rates which we have discussed yesterday. But the problem with monetary measure is you can't handle cost push or structural problems. That is the reason inflation targeting becomes difficult. There should be coordination between monetary policy as well as the fiscal policy. That is what we write conclusions in the mains exam. You can't handle inflation targeting without the support of fiscal policy. Okay, so then here if you see fiscal measures through budgetary policies, increase in direct taxes, decrease in indirect taxes, decrease in government expenditure. So decrease in government expenditure means you're reducing the fiscal stimulus, because more fiscal stimulus, more inflation. Okay, so government in the recent past has come up with restrictions. It has come up with minimum export price, right? It has put restrictions on rice and wheat exports. All this is primarily to handle agriculture related inflation. So these are all something like administrative measures taken by the government in the recent past. Is that okay? This is simple only. There's no confusion. So see here, banning of export of certain items, strengthening PDS system to reduce leakages. So these are all administrative measures. Okay, importing commodities which are in short supply, or reducing import duties. We did it last time. Reducing import duties on certain metals so that that will be cheaper in India. So that it will be, you will be able to handle cost push inflation or imported inflation. Imported inflation to be handled by reducing the import duty. Is that okay? Yes. Now, here measurement of inflation. So this is one more area where questions can come. So one is you can measure inflation at the producer level, then the wholesaler, and also at the retail level. So when I'm measuring inflation at the wholesale level, you have transportation costs. At the producer level, okay, so you have the producer, and from there, transportation is there, wholesaler, through the distribution network, you're going to the retailer, and here the prices which you are talking about is retail inflation. Here we are talking about CPI, here we are talking about WPI. So WPI includes transportation also. Okay, but transportation, if I see it as services, then services will not be included in my WPI index. Now see here, why are we developing an index and what is the use of index? Here, two things you will remember. The basic difference between WPI and CPI. Can WPI be greater than CPI? Can WPI index be greater than CPI? Yes, it can. Why? Because the weightages are different in different indices, in CPI and WPI. There were instances, if you would read last year's economic survey, There was a clear index, there was a clear demarcation of graphs showing that WPI was higher than CPI, and then later there was convergence of WPI and CPI. Why is it different? Because WPI has a different basket and CPI has a different basket, number one. Number two, the weightages in WPI is different. The weightages in CPI is different. And therefore, WPI can also be greater than CPI. This is a misconception that WPI will be lower than CPI. No, WPI can be greater than CPI. Is that okay? That is first thing. Second important observation is, now in WPI index, which entity has maximum weightage in the WPI index? Manufacturing. Manufacturing around 64.2%. Okay, manufacturing is the high weightage. So in CDS, there was a question asked from this line. Okay, you can observe here, primary articles 22.6, fuel and power 13%, manufacturing 64.2. So those numbers I should know. Something like, at least I should know manufacturing is leading, then followed by primary articles, then followed by, that is required to answer that question. Estimated by Office of Economic Advisor under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And the base year for WPI calculation is 2011-12, and services is not part of my WPI index. Till here, I think there's no confusion. Now, if you see this question, I'll show you the question first, then we can come back. This was asked this year's CDS. Okay, so that means question on weightage. Okay, so see here, fuel and power have higher weightage in WPI than primary. Wrong. So it is primary, it is manufacturing, primary, and then fuel. This was the question. Okay, and then weightage of manufactured products in WPI is higher than that of fuel. That is known already. 64.2% is what? Manufacturing. There can be another statement, WPI includes services. It's a wrong statement. WPI does not include what? Services. Okay, WPI can be greater than CPI, yes, because weightages are different. Okay, and it can be greater. Which one is called as imported inflation? WPI is called as imported inflation. Remember, WPI is called as imported inflation. That means if my imported products are becoming costly, it will first have an impact on WPI. WPI index will increase first. And then with a lag, the effect will come after some time on CPI. Obviously, if my raw materials become costly, then the final consumer also ends up paying more after a certain period. That means increase in WPI will lead to increase in CPI with a lag. Is that okay? Understood? Yes. Now, see here. So that was a question that was asked, a simple question which can be answered provided you're not confused and you clearly know. You need not know the numbers. At least you should know which one is manufacturing, followed by primary article, followed by fuel and power. Is that okay? Yes. Now, indirect taxes are not included while estimating WPI. Does not account for the products of unorganized sector in India. Okay, so these are two important things just for info, which you'll remember. So consumer price index. Now there are different CPI indices. For policy making, we are using CPI combined. CPI combined is what? CPI rural plus CPI urban. So when when government is coming up with inflation target of 4 plus or minus 2, that is obviously CPI combined. Is that okay? Right? That is CPI rural plus CPI urban. Now, one important observation here. So this is the CPI inflation. The base year for CPI is what? 2012. See, we always take a basket of commodities. And in that basket, we are putting commodities. You have goods also, you have services also. So you are putting commodities and services from 6 different areas in CPI basket. What are the 6 different areas? One is the food and beverages, which has the highest weightage. 45.9% food and beverages. And then you have pan, tobacco, intoxicants, 2.4, clothing and footwear, housing, fuel and light, and miscellaneous. So almost like how many categories? 6 categories are part of my CPI basket. This is a CPI combined basket. And which one has maximum weightage? Food and beverages. 45.9% is food and beverage. So now 2 words here. One, when I use a word headline inflation, Headline inflation means it is the complete overall inflation when I take all these items, including volatile aspects like food and fuel. Complete, 100%. When I say headline will be always 100 because I'm taking everything. But when I say core inflation, so core inflation will exclude volatile aspects like food and fuel. Volatile is so which one will be a more stable kind of inflation? You should worry more when you're you should worry more when you're core. But for policy making, we use headline. You should worry more when your core inflation itself is increasing. But for policy making, we are using what? CPI headline. CPI headline. So that 4 plus or minus 2 is what? CPI combined headline. Is that okay? Understood. So that is simple. Now, when it comes to CPI rural and urban also, now if they specifically ask a question with CPI rural and CPI urban, then you should understand that the weightages in CPI rural and CPI urban are going to be different. Weightage is not same. So if you make an observation here, food and beverages is rural is how much? 54.18. And urban it is only 36%. That is the weight. Overall, it is 45.9. Are you able to get this? Overall 45.9. But CPI rural and CPI urban, the weights are different. So that means inflation, food prices will have a different impact on rural, CPI rural and CPI urban. If there is a statement, food prices will have a same impact on CPI rural and urban, it is wrong. Why? Because the weight which you have given to CPI, food and beverage and CPI rural and CPI urban is different. Is that okay? So this is the understanding from this chart. And then you can see housing as services. Services, is it part of CPI? Yes. Services is not part of WPI. In CPI rural, there is nothing like housing. Why? Because kacha houses at least are there. So there's nothing like rent or something like property does not form a important aspect in CPI rural. But when I look at CPI urban, you find 21.67. Is that okay? Yes. So then most of the states, 22-23, rural inflation was more than the urban inflation. Why? Because food prices, it was because of food inflation. It was primarily because of food inflation. Food could not reach the rural areas faster because of supply chain constraints. So because of proper supply chain, food reached urban areas faster and food inflation was handled faster in urban areas. And because of that, in 22-23, rural, CPI rural inflation was higher in most of the states than urban inflation. Weights are different. This is the observation. Okay, I think it is clear till here. Is that okay? Now, if I make a comparison between WPI and CPI, so the weightages are different in WPI and CPI. Weights are different. And therefore, the impact of items will be different on WPI index and CPI. There was a previous UPSC question on that. Previous UPSC question on that, on weights. So since it is different, the impact would be different. So food prices will have a different impact on CPI and WPI. Is that okay? Yes. Services, no services, there you have services. So that is something like one observation. Very simple. If at all a question comes up also, it will be a simple question only. Okay, so there should not be any confusion. You should not mark wrong answers. Now, one CPI inflation which you should be remembering is CPI industrial workers. Why? Because the base year has been changed recently. So last year's CDS exam, they have asked this question. So the base year for CPI industrial worker is 2016. It was a recent update. So for CPI industrial worker, the base year is 2016. This is a factual question. Okay. So here you can see mainly used for determining dearness allowance paid to central and state government employees and workers. So it is compiled and maintained by whom? Labor Bureau, Ministry of Labor and Employment. Okay. Similarly, CPI agriculture, labor. Okay. So here it is compiled by Labor Bureau. Okay. Ministry of Labor and Employment. Okay, but CPI rural worker compiled by Labor Bureau, Ministry of Labor and Employment. But CPI combined is compiled by CSO, or now you're calling it as NSO. Is that okay? National Statistical Office. So this is one more important area where there can be a question. And already CDS has asked this question, so. Okay, now there was one good question that is asked in CDS 2024. See, GDP deflator, yesterday we have solved one question. Nominal GDP divided by real GDP into 100. For policy making, we are not using GDP deflator because it does not talk about imported inflation. This is what we have discussed yesterday, and we have also checked one question already. Okay, so when we talk about inflation measurement, this was the question that was asked in CDS this year. See this question. So got the question? Okay, so this is one question. So he's talking about the application part. Okay, so this is an application-based question. So the price index captures the change in the average price of a constant basket. Yes, there's no problem. Constant basket, you're taking 448 or 460, rural, urban. Okay, so basket is okay. Weights are different. Now here, the price index takes values 100, 110, and 121 in 3 consecutive years, respectively. Then inflation rates. That means if you're taking 100, 110, 121. So 100 to 110 is something like 10%. But when I measure from 110 to 121, so it is like 100 to 110, 10%. Then again from 110 to 121, okay, so it can't be 21. So you are not measuring it at 100, then you're not measuring it with 100 and saying it is 21%. So 100, then it became 110, that means 10% increase. And then 121, you're measuring it with 110. Are you able to get this? So that is the reason the second statement is wrong. This is called application-based question. Since he has asked, probably this is not a difficult question. You can't say this is difficult. It is not like one question which you have left yesterday. I said you try one question. That's a difficult question. But this is not a difficult question. It's an application-based question. That is okay if you're measuring it with base year. But when I say inflation is increasing at 6%, okay, 7%, how do you measure that 7? How do you getting that 7? No, that is how you measure. So here, if the price index takes values 100, index value 100, then 110 and 121 in 3 consecutive years. He's saying 3 consecutive years. Then the inflation rates in the second and the third years. So what will I say? My inflation rate in the third year, when I say, I will not say 21%. That is what is a simple observation. Forget about base year. See how is an index built? So how is an index built? You take something like, I take a basket, I put some commodities, give weight, and I'll index that to 100. This can be 3 lakhs rupees, which is indexed to 100. Are you able to get this? Now next year, this is becoming 110 means I need to spend 10% more from my pocket to get the same basket of commodity. That is the meaning, basically. And then in the next year, it became 121. This 121, you can't compare and say, how do I say today inflation is 6%? Year after year, inflation is increasing. You're not saying by comparing it with 100. You're saying it by comparing it with 110. That is what he's saying, a year, 3 consecutive years. Is that okay? Yes. So year on year inflation means that particular rate, that week, last year, what is the inflation? See, anything can be measured on, even GDP also. I can measure GDP on quarter basis or year on year basis. Anything, any measurement. I can measure the performance of a company also year on year basis. So last year, first quarter, how did the company perform? Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Same applies here. So I compare it with this year's quarter. Same with GDP also. So when I'm comparing last year, first quarter means April, May, June, July, August, September, like that, right? Okay, so when I'm comparing this year's first quarter with last year, it is called year-on-year comparison, isn't it? And I can also have a quarter-on-quarter comparison. I'm comparing. Are you able to get this? Is that okay? Year-on-year, quarter-on-quarter. Okay. Disinflation, fall in inflation rate, no tension with respect to disinflation. Deflation is fall in prices, not good for any economy. It is associated with unemployment, which you know. Reflation, deflationary, and see, it refers to a situation in which demand is more than the productive capacity. That is, demand is increasing. The total demand is increasing in comparison to supply. Demand graph will shift rightward. Is that okay? Then deflationary gap, so it is the reverse basically. You will have the demand graph shifting this way. Okay. So then recession, depression. So recession, you know, negative growth for 2 successive quarters and above, 2 and above. Okay. Inflation spiral. See, inflation spiral is a situation where you're comparing wage and price. Increase in wages is leading to inflation. And when inflation is increasing, again, you're asking for higher wages. It's a cycle. Okay. Now, in the newspapers, there's a discussion, something like hard landing and soft landing. So this is called as inflationary expectations. See, inflation expectations will also have negative impact on inflation. That means if people have more trust on government policies, RBI's policies, they will expect that the inflation will decrease. So that will also have an impact on reducing inflation. If you don't trust, then automatically they will not have trust on RBI's policies. Then they believe that the inflation in the future will increase. So obviously they'll ask for higher wages. They will price their product at a higher level so that I'll get better profits, etc. So inflationary expectations also have an impact on inflation, along with inflation spiral. Okay. And policies of government, yes. So fiscal policy, monetary policy of government. So that is what they're saying. They're saying US, if you don't reduce your federal bank rates, you may land up in recession. That means US method of handling inflation can be hard landing. That means US may land up with respect to ending up in recession. So this is hard landing. India, at least we don't have that problem. We'll not land up in recession because we are growing at a decent rate. Is that okay? So this is what you should understand. Overheating of economy. In overheating, what will happen? The suppliers will have more, there is more demand in the market. There is more consumption of resources. There is always a gap between demand and supply. People are consuming more, producers are producing more. Okay, so supply is less, demand is more. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, that is about inflation. Easy and simple. Expectation. See, expectation. See, if I am expecting that tomorrow prices will not be controlled by my RBI. So what I mean is RBI and government are putting in efforts to handle inflation, right? And they use different policies. It can be monetary policy, it can be fiscal policy. But as an individual, households plus firms, if I don't have trust on my policies, of the government, then you are expecting that inflation in the future will increase. Okay, whenever inflation increases, for a depositor, his real interest rate, which he gets from the bank, you put money, you're getting 5% interest, but my real interest will go down or go negative. Okay, because I believe that future. So I'll take a call. I will not put money in the bank. I'll take a call. Why? Because this is the reason. Okay. So I don't trust. Similarly, I may go to my boss and say, increase my wage. It can lead to inflationary spiral because I am expecting that inflation will increase. So therefore, I'll ask my boss, if you're giving me 4% hike, I don't want you, keep it with you. Okay, so because it is less than the inflation, at least make it 8. Later, you at least beat the inflation. If you're not beating the inflation, then there's no point. Okay, so that means inflationary spiral is also directly proportional to my inflationary expectation. And now firms will take a call whether to invest or not. Because after investing, if the prices are going to increase, people don't have consumption power. So therefore, better I will not invest. That means investment will also come down. I think you got my point, right? So this is how expectations can also have an impact. Is that okay? So the next topic is unemployment. It is again a very simple topic. Built-in inflation is something like automatic. As and when your growth is happening, then there would be some amount of inflation. Okay, so unemployment, what are the main concepts that, see, one, in unemployment, where questions can come? This is a simple topic. Okay, so one is the concepts like unemployment rate, labor force participation rate, worker population ratio. These are some concepts. Okay, so there can be, if at all is going to ask. So unemployment rate, these are concepts which we will see. And then another important observation is the methods of measuring unemployment. So you have usual status, current weekly status, and current daily status. This is something like measurement of unemployment. Okay, and then there can be, if at all he wants to ask an easy question, he can ask on types of unemployment, different types. Okay, so different types of unemployment. So that is one area there where there can be a question. Last year, UPSC asked the question, which is a difficult question. Last year. So that was on casual labor. Now, this is what you should understand. UPSC is not going to ask questions on unemployment rate. Those days are over. Okay, so you should know that there can be a question on formal, informal employment. What is the difference? Or gig, what is the difference? Or maybe casual worker. Who's a casual worker? Okay, so, and any changes with respect to the rules for casual labor in the recent past. Okay, so that is one more area where there can be a question. Okay, is that clear? Okay, and then there is a new survey which they came up with, which is called as the PLFS, Periodic Labor Force Survey. Periodic Labor Force Survey, where the NSO comes up with, and it also uses two methods. One is the usual status and the current weekly status. So this is more periodic. So it is little different from the earlier survey, that is the employment-unemployment survey, which was conducted once every 5 years. This was conducted. So this is conducted annually in rural plus urban areas, and on a quarterly basis in urban areas. Annually, rural plus urban, quarterly in urban areas. So in urban areas on a quarterly basis, it uses only CWS. I'll come to that in here. So I think it is clear. Okay, so these are the areas where there can be a question. Okay, so when I use the word unemployment rate, it is nothing but the labor force. Okay, labor force minus workforce. Okay, divided by labor force multiplied by 100. Okay. See, that is something like, what is labor force? It includes all those who are between 15 to 59, who are already working. Working means workforce. plus 15 to 59 who are looking for work. They are looking for work but no work. Is that okay? No work. So when I subtract this workforce from labor force, I arrive at this population who are looking for work but no work, divided by the total labor force multiplied by 100. Okay, 95% UPSC will not ask. Is that okay? So that is about unemployment rate. Okay. Then how is it different from LFPR? Now, it is something like, what is labor force participation rate? It is labor force divided by working age population. Working age population multiplied by 100. Are you able to get this? Working age, not total population. Okay, so that means, what is the basic difference here? So those, is that clear? Okay, so here, those who are looking for work, you're saying those who are looking for work but no work divided by, but if my labor force participation is dropping, it will indicate that people are not participating for work. Are you able to get this? They are not part of my labor force. That means they are not looking for work. So after COVID, suppose in rural areas, they have decided not to look for work. That cannot be indicated in my unemployment rate. In the unemployment rate, you will only be able to find if he is looking for work. That is the reason you can't stop with unemployment rate. If he is not looking for work, he stopped looking for work, that cannot be checked through unemployment rates. It only talks about those who are already working and those who are looking for work. But those who are not looking for work, maybe because lack of skills or they are fed up, they have given up on jobs. Are you able to get this? So that you cannot check through unemployment rate. For that, I need what? LFPR. So in current affairs, you will read, I'm not discussing that. The madam was won Nobel Prize. Okay, so that's not here. So this is not current affair class, but you will go check that as well. Okay, so what is that? U curve. Okay, fine. So then worker population ratio, it is the workforce to the total population. Workforce to the total population. Is that okay? So these are indicators. Is this clear? Understood? Okay. Then different methods of measuring unemployment. One is usual status. So in this usual status, it is going to measure long-term unemployment problem. Long-term. That means I'm checking for 365 days prior to the date of survey. 365 days prior to the date of survey. So today I'm conducting the survey, I'm collecting the data of 365 days prior to today. And if somebody is not getting job for 183 days, more than 6 months, unemployed status. Okay. When I use the word current weekly status, what is this weekly status? I'm taking 7 days reference, 7 days reference period. Okay. And if somebody is getting work for at least 1 hour or more on 1 or more days, 1 hour or more days, 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. Actually, government's PLFS right now is using subsidiary status also. So usual status, you have principal plus subsidiary. Now this is, they have changed the way now. That is creating problem. I should not say that, but subsidiary status means in that 1 year, if you're getting 30-day work also, 30 days you're getting work also, you're treated as employed. So though if it is like if I'm not employed under the principal status means 6 months. Subsidiary status means 30-day. So if I'm employed for 180 days, you're employed. If I'm including subsidiary also means, if I'm employed for 30 days in 365 days, then also I'm given employed status. This will reduce unemployment rate. Because you are adding both, you're calculating like this, you're calculating like this. Since you're adding both, this will reduce the unemployment rate. Chronic unemployment, which method? Usual status. Current weekly status, 1 hour or more on 1 or more days. Is that okay? Yes. Then current daily status, here also you're taking 7 days reference. 7 days reference. You will also be checking on each day here. Each day you will check in the week. And if somebody is working for at least 1 hour, but less than 4 hours, you will give him employed for half a day. Half day you're employed. 4 hours and above, you're employed for 4 hours and more, then it is like you're employed for the full day. So this is basically, CDS is a kind of a time rate. Time rate. Partial employment can also be talked about with CDS. See, this is basically the problem here is, it is basically your unorganized, Unorganized. Now I'll take it as casual labor. So when I think you got my point, right? See, in the employed status, when I talk about employment, till here is it okay? Okay, so when I talk about employment, one is self-employment, isn't it? One is self-employment. Another one is hired workers. In the hired class, you have regular worker. And you'll also have casual labor. Okay, casual labor. Now, there was a question on this, but of course that question is a difficult question. Why it is a difficult question? Because Supreme Court has come up with one judgment talking about pension allowance for casual labor. Okay. So here. So casual labor means the casual labor are not on the permanent payrolls of the company. They are not on the permanent payroll. Regular worker is on the permanent payroll. Casual worker not on the permanent payroll. Is that okay? Not on the permanent payroll of the company. Is that okay? Then the casual labor or the casual worker, he's eligible for fixed number of hours. Fixed hours, and is also eligible for overtime payment. That is there, but they are not on the permanent payroll. They do not have all the benefits of Social Security, which are regular. Not all, but there is a trouble here. The question. Supreme Court said they will have access to pension as well. Okay, so that means they can apply for pension. So therefore, there was a question asked last year. Okay, so that will create a problem. Are you able to get this? But do they have all the Social Security rights as the regular worker has? No. Not all the Social Security rights. So when I'm talking about casual labor, it is all about hired workers. So when I'm talking about somebody has hired you and you are working as a casual labor there. That is the difference basically. Is that okay? Okay. So increase in, because of globalization. So globalization has led to casualization of workforce. Globalization has led to casualization of workforce. So one reason is, on one side, real estate in urban areas, MGNREGS, the question which he was talking about, MGNREGS in rural areas. Is that okay? That is also a reason for casualization of workforce. Is that okay? Yes. Fine. Till here, there's no confusion. This is a simple topic, not like national income. National income is also simple only, provided you have gone back and checked the concept once again. Okay. Now, so LFPR, so persons employed plus person unemployed. Unemployed means somebody who's looking for work. So this is creating confusion. Better is that formula which I've written. Is that okay? This is creating confusion. So here, unemployed means he's looking for work but no work. Suppose I'm not looking for work only. You decided to enjoy life. Okay, so then you're not looking for work. Then you're not here in the numerator. Got the point, right? Okay. Workforce, worker population ratio. Okay, so worker population ratio, workforce, persons employed divided by the total population. Okay, so that is one. And then, Okay, so here, when we talk about organized employment type, okay, so organized, unorganized. Okay, so in the unorganized, you can observe here, regular salaried employment with some benefits in enterprises employing less than 10 workers. Are you able to get this? Okay, so this is also a definition of informal. Basically, this is a definition. So here, informal, various types of contract work and employment of short duration without job security in enterprises employing 10 or more. That means he's talking about in the organized. So in the organized segment, can there be informal labor? Yes. Okay, so then in the unorganized segment, can there be informal workers? Yes. Or daily wage laborers, etc. Okay, so there can be. But going by the definition of informal sector, so if in a private sector, if somebody is employing less than 10 workers, okay, so they will fall under the informal category only. Karol Bagh Chai Wala. Informal. If he is employing less than 10 and is working there, so that is something, though he may generate revenue. This is the definition of informal. Is that okay? In the unorganized? Yes. Different types of unemployment. Types of unemployment here, what we will remember only, very simple this is very simple. So what you will remember, I will tell you. So before that, see this was the question, UPSC question. See, how do I answer such questions is, simple, everybody says elimination is eliminated, but I don't think so. See, logic will always be there. You should look for questions with logic. There will be questions with logic, whether in CDS or UPSC prelim. Okay, so here, the government can by notification specify that an establishment or industry shall pay wages only through its bank account. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing. So obviously that will be right. There's nothing like somebody can say this is wrong. Finished. So therefore 3 should be there in my answer. Got the point, right? 3 should be there in my answer. Okay. So that is something like you eliminated 1 and 2, and then you will slowly check out of these 3. But the confusion comes up here, B and C and D. Okay, so what is the confusion? All casual workers are entitled to regular working hours and overtime payment. This is there in definition. This is a pure definition, which I was talking about. That means 2 is okay. There's no trouble with respect to 2. That means 2 and 3 are okay. But now the question is with respect to the first one. All casual workers are entitled to employees' provident fund. Employee provident fund coverage, there was a judgment. It's not that they are eligible for all social security as a regular worker. Okay, so what some students did, they said all means wrong, and therefore they marked it wrong. That didn't work. Okay, so this is a difficult question. Difficult UPSC question where there's more probability of marking the wrong answer. Because you'll think like, oh, PF, if it is eligible, then what is the difference between a regular worker and a casual? This is the doubt you will get. And therefore, you'll eliminate 1, you'll mark 2 and 3, and you're gone. I think you got this. That is why it is difficult. But there was Supreme Court's order which says all casual workers are entitled to employee provident fund coverage. That is from the current. So what is UPSC answer key? Are you sure? Check it once in the break. Check the answer for this question. Okay? Yes. Check the UPSC key. I think last year or before last year, it should be 2021. Is that okay? Yes, so now understand that, forget about questions like disguised. Okay, if it is coming, it is okay. It is a jackpot. So different types of unemployment. One is disguised unemployment. So when I say disguised, marginal productivity of labor is 0. There are more people than required who are working in the farm. So there's no problem there. Frictional is also called as search, isn't it? You're jumping jobs, hopping jobs in between your idle. Okay, so this is generally you're doing it wantedly. Okay, so generally. Okay, so frictional. Then structural unemployment. There is a mismatch between the skills required for the job and the skills which you have. Okay, so that is what is structural unemployment. So these are the two types of unemployment which are generally linked to developed countries. Of course, it is there here also, but developed. And these are the two types of unemployment which can never be removed from any economy. Never be removed. Though the economy is growing at a peak level also, you will have frictional and structural unemployment. I hope it is clear. Is that okay? Yes. And then you have seasonal unemployment. Seasonal is also related to agriculture. Okay. Underemployment. So UPSC did not cover that first one. So answer is 2 and 3. Is that okay? Yes. So now see here, disguised unemployment, frictional, structural. Till here I think it is clear. Okay. And then you have underemployment. What is underemployment? Working way below your skills. Engineers working in call center. No package discussion. Okay, unemployed. Not unemployed, underemployed. Finished. Okay, so is this clear? So that is about types. Cyclical unemployment is also, you can call it as demand-related unemployment. Demand. So this is because of the cycles of the economy. Cycles of the economy. Demand-related unemployment. Is that okay? So UPSC took 2 and 3. Good. That is easy. 2 and 3 is okay. But Supreme Court then UPSC said, okay, lightly low. This is something like employee, this is not entitled to employees' provident fund. So which provident fund logic? How do I take it? So that is how. So, but it's good that we have to see where there is discrepancy. Wherever there is discrepancy, that question is more important. Okay? Yes. Nature of unemployment in India. Informalization, female participation rate is less, casualization, ruralization. Okay. So reasons for unemployment. What are the main reasons for unemployment? Okay, so reasons for unemployment, we'll put it here itself. Simple only. You can identify also. What are the reasons for unemployment? One, what we followed earlier, that is capital intensive growth. What we followed, second 5-year plan plus. Manufacturing sector not doing well. Okay, or MSMEs turning out to become dwarfs. Jobless growth. Yes, jobless growth. Jobless growth. Structural unemployment or structural problems in the economy. Or the structural reforms which we brought in also after 1991. That is also a reason. Over tertiarization. Yes, over tertiarization. Our education system, Macaulay's English education, which is useless. Okay, so that is also a reason. So there is lack of skills, skill sets, skill development, etc. This is all English only. You can mark the answer. There's no point. For mains we can draw the flow chart. But here, so all these English words, when they come, you will anyhow mark the answer. So there's no point. Is that okay? And then there is abrupt shift also. Okay, so from primary to tertiary sector. That is what is over tertiarization. Jobless growth, this you could see. Now one more concept here, employment elasticity. So when I use the word employment elasticity is dropping, what does it indicate? So employment elasticity is proportionate change in employment to proportionate change in GDP. It's an indicator of employment elasticity is falling, means it's an indicator of what? Jobless growth. There can be a statement. Employment elasticity is falling means it's an indicator of jobless growth. I hope it is clear. Understood? Is that okay? Now, employment elasticity has dropped after 1991. Answer is yes. If I take after 1991, employment elasticity reached almost like 0.04 by 2011-12. By 2011-12, employment elasticity became 0.04. Is that okay? Employment elasticity became negative for agriculture. Agriculture employment elasticity became negative means existing jobs are also replaced. Is that clear? Okay, so this is simple only. So now Phillips curve. What does Phillips curve talk about? It talks about an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. Inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. Is it always valid? No. At a certain period of time, you have observed that there was a situation where inflation and unemployment are going in the inverse relationship. Is that okay? High inflation rate, you find unemployment is less. Is this clear? This also they've asked. Phillips curve already asked, but still you'll have a view that it is related to unemployment chapter. Is that okay? Now we don't have time. We'll first do taxes. We'll first do taxes and then come to budget, because budget there is some polity portion also. So here, okay. Okay, now before we look into this, first look into this one. So currently, if you observe, we are getting maximum revenue from income tax. So Subramania Swami's logic now doesn't work. Like, you remove income tax. That is not going to be done, because you are generating more revenue from the income tax. This is a very clear observation here. Okay, so then you have income tax, which is giving almost like, that means direct taxes are forming a major aspect. So in newspaper, I think yesterday, day before yesterday, there was a discussion on inheritance tax. Okay, so that was something like the estate duty earlier. And that was also a kind of a direct tax. That was also a kind of a direct tax. Anyway, I'll make a list of the taxes. Okay, so here you can see income tax. And then you can see corporate tax around 17%, GST and other taxes around 18%. Okay, so this is about your observation. And then in CDS, there was one question. The question 2024 was, which of the following excise duties will not be shared by the center with the state? A difficult question. Okay, so, and he has given some options. I'll come to that question after some time. Okay, so he has given 3 options: basic excise duty, special excise duty, and some additional excise duty. So generally, there's no discussion in the regular classes, and it's a purely factual question. So there was also one more factual question on GST. Okay, so this is, you've observed this. Okay, rupee goes to this. I'll come, like, one important observation here is, this is the dangerous area out of all the revenue expenditures, right? So this is something which we already know. Now coming to taxes, now we'll do it here. So tax is something which you have to pay without any definite quid pro quo. You should not say, you give me this benefit, then I will pay. Okay, and constitutional framers were very clear with respect to who will be levying the taxes. That is, all those taxes which are part of the list 1 were levied by the center, and all those taxes which are part of the list 2 were levied by the state. Levy does not mean you will collect. It is only imposing a tax. This is what you should understand. So all those taxes which we talk about, like, for example, estate duty earlier, not there now. Estate duty is not there, removed long back, introduced in 1953. Okay, it is in news, something related to inheritance. Suppose a person, ex-grandfather, rich grandfather, no more. Okay, and he is transferring the property to the legal heirs. There you are coming up with levying a tax on the total property of the deceased which is given to the legal heir, right? So that is something like the inheritance. In US it is there. That is the reason there was this discussion, around 50-55% they are collecting in US. So now our Prime Minister also used it well. He said, that means he'll take away your property also. Because it was a Congress person who was using this line. Okay, so here, that is inheritance, about estate duty. Estate duty. Is it there now? No. But estate duty on agriculture again will go in the state list. Are you able to get this? Is this clear? Right? So here when we talk about all these taxes like income tax, here I'm not talking direct or indirect. I'm only saying who will levy. Corporate tax or MAT, minimum alternate tax, customs or excise, terminal taxes on goods and services which are moving on rail, air, etc. All these will be levied by whom? Center. Is that okay? So these are all levied by the center. Okay, so even customs, etc. So many taxes are there. Okay, but at the state level, taxes on what? Land revenue, advertisement other than newspaper. Okay, entertainment, okay, purchase tax, sales tax except interstate trade, sales tax except interstate. This is intra. You need to be a little fast here. Intrastate trade. So I'm talking about sales tax or I'm talking about VAT. Is that okay? Taxes on motorcycles, motor vehicles, boats, animals, all that. Okay, so road, inland waterways, you're traveling on road, inland waterways, all that also it will be state only. Okay, professional taxes, property taxes, professional tax like, of course, in some of the states it is there. For example, lawyers, doctors, okay, teachers. So professional tax would be levied. Is that okay? Lottery, betting, gambling. Okay, octroi, entry tax, octroi. Of course, octroi or entry tax, all this is also, who levies it? State. So that something like, so earlier there was a question, 1995, corporate tax is levied, collected and appropriated by. So 1995, so 3 amendments you should remember. One is the 80th constitutional amendment. Okay, so this has pushed in something like all the important taxes should be made part of the divisible pool of taxes. Heard of this word? All the taxes have to be made part of the divisible pool from where the center will share it with the state. Center will share it with the states. So based on the 10th Finance Commission recommendation subsequently, okay, so based on 80th constitutional amendment, now all the taxes which are levied by the center were made part of the divisible pool except few. Okay, so that means through 80th constitutional amendment only, corporate tax was made part of the divisible pool. I think before that means before 2000, corporate tax was not part of the divisible pool. That means corporate tax was not shared by the center with the state. This is the understanding. So that time the question in 1995, the answer would be levied by center, collected by center, used by center. Because it is not used by state because before that, it is not made part of the divisible pool. But since states were not getting enough revenue, so based on the recommendations of the 10th Finance Commission, you have come up with 80th constitutional amendment, which says all the taxes will be pushed except those mentioned under Article 268, except those which are mentioned under Article 269. Is that okay? Article 268, 269, and also cess and surcharge, and SGST portion of IGST. This will also not be shared with the state. See here, Article 268 talks about all those taxes which are levied by center, but collected and appropriated by state. Levied by center, collected and used by the state. So already it is going to the state. For example, stamp duties, excise. Okay, so then Article 269 talks about those taxes which are levied and collected by center. Levied and collected by center, but given to the, distributed to states. There's a difference. So again, it is already going to the state. So there is no point of putting it in the divisible pool. Simple. Then SGST portion will go to the importer state. Whenever there is IGST, SGST portion of the IGST, I'll come to IGST. Okay, so that will also go to the importer state. So therefore, that will also not be part of my divisible pool. So 15th Finance Commission talks about sharing how much? Around 41%, right? 41%. So you should be knowing there is something like horizontal devolution and vertical devolution, right? Vertical from the center, how much to the... Okay, fine. That is, again, we'll not get into that discussion, polity part. So till here, I think it is clear, okay? So when we talk about taxes, so taxes can be levied. There are two types of taxes primarily. One, we call it as the direct taxes. Okay, and another one is what? Indirect taxes. So currently, we are we are getting revenues. So direct taxes are dominating. Of course, yesterday's newspaper, again, GST highest. So got the point, right? Okay, so, but of course, we are okay with that. But now the question here is like, direct taxes are playing an important role. So what are direct taxes? Direct taxes are taxes where the impact and incidence of the tax are on the same point, or the burden of the tax cannot be shifted. Okay, now central government, now these are important here. Observe central government direct taxes. One is, we have the income tax. We'll see the slabs later. Okay, then you have what? Corporate tax. If you're not paying corporate tax properly, or there is a provision of minimum alternate tax, or 15% on book profits. Okay, so if you are claiming deductions using the tax loopholes and claiming yourself to be a zero tax company, government has come up with a 15% tax on the book profit. See, book profit is yet to be realized. I have not realized the profit. In the book, it shows. So it is something like the profit which I have to realize in the form of cash. Okay, so I've not realized it in the form of cash, but books show that I will realize so much. Okay, so this is basically, there's a method to calculate book profits. Okay, so depreciation and all will be added to calculate book profits. Okay, so MAT is also a direct tax. Okay, earlier there was DDT, dividend distribution tax, which was removed in budget 2020. So dividend distribution tax means what? Paid by the company which is distributing dividends. On the dividends it is distributing, there is a dividend distribution tax. So now, who is going to pay this tax? So this will be paid by the person who is receiving the dividend. You're receiving the dividend, you receive 1 lakh dividend, it will be added to your income, and according to your income tax slab, you will be paying it. So now it is not the company which is distributing dividend. So dividend distribution tax is paid by the company which is distributing dividend. So that is not there. It's a direct tax, right? Then gift tax. Heard of this? So around 1958 they came up, and in 1990s they have removed it. But gift tax is still there indirectly. You should remember that. So Gift Tax Act has been removed, but gift tax has become part of your Income Tax Act. Are you able to get this? Suppose, so if there is gift you're receiving, and the gift amount is more than 50,000 rupees. So earlier gift tax was paid by the donor. Donor is somebody who is giving the gift. Okay, so currently what is happening, since Gift Tax Act has been removed, instead of the donor paying the tax, now the donee will pay. Whoever is taking the gift. You're taking the gift, you got a gift of, let's say, 3 lakh rupees. Okay, so that 3 lakh rupees, that means more than 50,000. And there are certain criteria that will be added to your income tax. Your tax liability, it will be added to your income. Your income is already, let's say, 60 lakhs per annum. And you received a gift of 3 lakhs. It is added. And then your tax liability is calculated, whichever tax bracket you fall, accordingly you will pay. Are you able to get this? So that means Gift Tax Act is removed, but gift tax has been included in your income tax. Is that okay? So, but gift tax, again, there are some references and concessions. For example, relatives are giving, there is an exemption. Local authorities are giving, there is exemption. Less than 50,000 rupee gifts, there is exemption. Gifts during marriage, exemption. Got the point, right? Marriage gifts? No. Okay. Okay, so this is how it is. So DDT, gift. Okay, so gift tax I'm not writing. Gift Tax Act is not there, but I'm writing here donee concept here. Okay, then fringe benefit tax, currently not in use. Fringe benefits are distributed by the company or the employer to the employees. So the employer While distributing fringe benefits, he is paying this tax called FBT. It is a direct tax. Okay. There was a wealth tax earlier, which is not there now. Modi ji has removed it in 2015. Okay, so wealth tax is something like if your wealth is above 30 lakh, it can be in cash, gold, etc. The government was collecting some 1% tax. So it is a direct tax. It is not there now. No wealth tax. Is that okay? Capital gains tax is there presently. Capital gains tax. So it is levied on the capital gain. So this can be levied on physical properties, physical, as well as financial, both. And who is going to pay this tax? It is the seller. Seller who's selling. Suppose I purchase this building for 5 crores, you sold it for 10 after 2 years. Okay, so that is something like you gained a 5 crore capital gain. On that 5 crore, you have to pay capital gains tax as a seller. I hope it is clear. Okay, and capital gains tax can be divided into long-term capital gains tax and short-term capital gains tax. Which one you will end up paying more? No. Generally, long-term, government should help us. Logically speaking, government should help us for holding the asset for a longer period. Okay, so it is because long-term means speculation will be less. Okay, so now this long-term capital gains tax will be applicable if you're holding this building, a physical property, for 2 years. 2 years at least. 2 years and above, you will be paying what? Long-term. Are you able to get this? So earlier definition was something like 3 years, 36 months. But in the budget amendments, they made it 2 years for physical property. Is that okay? 2 years and above, you pay long-term capital gains. Is that okay? Okay, so short-term, less than 2 years. This is for what? This is for physical property. Physical properties. But for example, if I talk about equity instruments, shares and all, you will be paying long-term capital gains tax, shares, long-term capital gains tax you will pay if you're holding it for 1 year, 365 days. 365 and above, long-term. Less than 365, you will pay short-term. Suppose today morning I purchased a share, okay, I sold it, let's say I got a profit of 50,000. So I have to pay long-term or short-term? Short-term. Got the point right? Okay, because I'm not holding it for, and one more thing is, here only if you're, in 1 year period, if your gain is more than 1 lakh, gain is more than 1 lakh only, you will be taxed at a rate of 10%. That is a good thing about equity. Up to 1 lakh, there is long-term, you will not pay any long-term capital gains tax. If your gain is more than 1 lakh in that 1 year, then you end up paying 10%. Is that okay? Property, it is 20%. But of course, property will not show everything, you know, black. Everything is black. Equity, everything is white, right? Okay, so here, so 1 lakh, you will pay 10. But again, debt instruments, debt, mutual funds and all that, the long-term criteria still remains at 3 years. You have to hold it for 3 years to pay something like long-term capital gains. Difficult to remember, but what you will remember is 2 years property, 1 year equity, 3 years debt funds or debt-related instrument. That much you can remember. Long-term capital gains is paid by whom? Seller. Any tax, CGT will be paid by seller on gain. If he makes a loss, no tax. It is only on the capital gain. And capital gains tax can also be levied on paintings, antiques, etc. Paintings and all. Okay, so yes. Non-fungible token, NFT, crypto trade, all that. Okay, fine. Now, till here, is it okay? Short-term capital gains tax, less than 2 years for property. Okay, so, and one more direct tax here is STT, Securities Transaction Tax. Now, your tax which you pay here, CGT, will also be dependent whether you are paying STT or not. So what is Security Transaction Tax? Direct tax. Remember direct tax? This is a tax which you pay to the stock market. Any security, buyer, seller, you're a buyer or a seller, both have to pay. Buyer, you're doing a transaction, as a buyer or a seller, you will be paying securities transaction tax. You're trading commodities, you pay commodity transaction tax. Direct taxes, all are direct taxes. Okay, so earlier there used to be banking transaction tax, which is not there now. BTT, banking, any bank transaction between 2005 and 6. It is not a service charge, it is a tax. Okay, any transaction you do, banking transaction, there was a direct tax which was there, which is called as banking transaction tax, which is not there now. Is that okay? So that is also a direct tax. What? Huh, okay. See, import, export, these are duties, right? Import duty and export duties. Okay. So all that. See, excise, GST, all that would be what? Indirect. Indirect, right? Okay. So till here, I think the examples are okay. Of course, in the material, you don't have all this, but I think if there is a question which of the following is not a direct tax, not an indirect tax. Estate duty is something related to inheritance, not in use. Launched in 1953, removed long back. Okay, it is related to inheritance is different from gift. Gift is different from wealth. All are different. All these taxes are different. Okay. Indirect taxes, we have excise, central government basically levied excise. We had customs and service tax, which was introduced through 88th Constitutional Amendment. And now you have GST, 101st Constitutional Amendment. Is that okay? Okay, so now excise duty still prevails with respect to those items which are not included in the GST. That is the reason that question was asked. It's a difficult question. So his question was, which of the following excise duties will not be shared by the center with the state? This was the question. So first thing is, excise is levied on what? Manufacturing or production. Who levies excise? Center, except alcohol. Leave aside alcohol. Again, there was some articles in the newspaper with respect to industrial alcohols. Center and state are fighting. They are going to the court. Let them fight. Okay, so they were fighting, right? So potable alcohol which we generally have. So that alcohol, excise will be levied by? State. Is that okay? So here excise is on production. Customs is on what? Import and export, right? That is the difference. Import and export. Is that clear? Okay. So earlier, to remove cascading effect with respect to excise, they came up with a concept called as manufacturing VAT. Man VAT. Of course, they have not written this. They have written mod VAT in your revision material. Okay. So manufacturing VAT means it will remove cascading effect with respect to excise. Based on LK Jha committee recommendations, they have come up with the concept of mod VAT, modified VAT. Is that okay? Mod VAT, modified VAT. Mod VAT around 1980s, 1986. Mod VAT. That means same man VAT was changed to mod VAT. Okay. So what is the purpose? Removing cascading effect with respect to excise. Everybody knows cascading effect, tax on tax, creating problems, right? Okay. One more thing here. What are the other things that are not shared by the center with state? It is cess and surcharge. Observe that. Cess and surcharge will not be shared by the center with the state. I'll come to that. So mod VAT, and then mod VAT was changed to central value added tax, CEN VAT. This is nothing but the basic excise. Central value added tax, CEN VAT. This will be shared by the center with the state. This will be shared by the center. That means it will get into the divisible pool. The meaning is it will get into divisible pool of taxes. Okay, so that will be shared. Central value added tax. So here different items had different rates. Here one rate for all the items, central value added tax. Now today this CEN VAT is also subsumed into CGST. Subsumed into CGST. You don't have CEN VAT. But those items which are not included in GST, for example, the 5 petroleum products, including aviation turbine fuel. Okay, so you will have CEN VAT because it is not part of my GST. You will have additional excise, and special excise duties. Special excise. Special excise is something like On some special products, you signify them as special products, that you are levying a separate tax over and above the SENVAT. Okay, so that will not be shared by the center with the state. Okay, that will not be shared by the center with the state. Additional excise duty is something like a separate cess on the excise. Cess, additional cess, excise related cess. So that will again not be shared by the center with the state. Okay, it will not be shared. So additional and special excise duty. Special is something like there are some special products which you signify them as special. You are levying an additional tax on them. That will not be shared by the center with the state. Otherwise, excise SENVAT is included in CGST, barring few exemptions. That is petrol. 5 petroleum products is not part of the GST system. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, so SENVAT is basic excise duty. I hope till there it is okay. Yes. Then when we talk about customs duties, customs, basically you have something like the basic customs duty, which is outside GST even now. Is that okay? Outside GST. Only the basic customs duty is outside GST, not all the custom duties. Is that okay? Yes. And that means who's going to still handle this? Center. Center will still handle the basic customs duty. Over and above this basic customs duty, you have additional customs duties, or we call it as countervailing duties, CVDs. These are made part, countervailing duties are made part of GST ambit. So countervailing duty means what? These duties are levied to handle excess subsidies, excess subsidy given by other countries. Other countries are levying more subsidy, giving more subsidy. Their products will become cheaper in India. Is that okay? Please don't expect break immediately, because we don't have much time, right? 7, 10, I'll give you 5 minutes or 10, 6. Is that okay? Fine. So additional customs duty to handle excess subsidy given by other countries, countervailing duties, or to handle excise duties, or to, so somebody who's producing products in India, he is paying excise. So to offset this excise, you have to bring them, both of them, on equal platform. No? So somebody is paying 13% excise in India, and the foreign fellow is not paying that. So you have to bring them on equal platform. So that is the reason you have countervailing duties or additional custom duties. And over and above that, you have special additional duties. This is levied first. So these two are part of my GST. Countervailing and special additional duties are part of GST, but basic custom duty is not part of my GST. Is that okay? And then over and above all that, if there is dumping, then there will be anti-dumping. This is not compulsory. Anti-dumping duty, Finance Ministry, I will take care of it. So anti-dumping duty will come up only when there is dumping. Is that okay? So only when there is dumping, selling a product, predatory dumping or a cost dumping, selling a product at a price lower than the cost of production in their country. Then you use a word cost dumping or predatory dumping. So to prevent that, you are coming up with anti-dumping duty. Is that okay? Is this clear? Understood? Now, I hope it is okay till here, right? So now, then we can go to our chart. See here, direct taxes. You can see here, income tax slabs. Okay, so direct taxes and income tax, basically the methods of taxing. So one is we use something like the progressive tax. Progressive. As the income is increasing, tax rates are also increasing. Okay, so we have regressive taxing. Regressive. Okay, and then we have proportional tax, like our corporate taxes. Proportional. Is that okay? And then there are some taxes, like we use the word digressive. So digressive is up to a certain point, it is progressive, and then it becomes parallel to my x-axis. This is basically digressive. So proportional, regressive, progressive. Okay, is that okay? So progressive taxing is based on the principle of equity. Equity. Equals will be treated equally. Unequals will be treated unequally. Those who are in this basket will be treated in one way. Those who are in another basket will be treated differently. This is. Okay, so here no tax up to 2.5 lakh or up to 3 means this is nothing but exemption. This is tax exemption. Exempted. So exemption is for everybody. This 2.5 lakh is exempted for everybody, isn't it? While when I'm talking about my tax liability, so if my salary is, let's say, 1 crore, in that also 2.5 lakhs would be removed. Okay, so 2.5 I need not pay any tax. Then next 2.5 in the old basket, next 2.5 I will pay at a rate of 5%. Okay, then the next 2.5 I will pay at a rate of 2.5 lakhs at a rate of 10%. Like this I will be paying, right? And above 15 lakhs, then something like above 15 lakhs is almost like, let's say 85 lakhs is above 15 lakhs, I'll pay it at 30%. Is that okay? So then I arrive at my tax liability or my taxable income. Is that okay? Right? So here there can be something like a rebate also, tax rebate. Okay, but rebate is not for everybody. Rebate is only for those whose income is less than a certain number. Either it is 5 lakh or 7 lakh in the new rate. Okay, so here it is, rebate is not for everybody. Rebate is only if your income falls below that level. So if my income is 1 crore, I can't ask for rebate. But suppose my income is only 4.9 lakh per annum. Then I am eligible for tax rebate. But exemption is for everybody. Is that okay? Yes. And then one more important observation is, suppose okay, suppose your salary is, let's say, salary is around 60 lakh. Salary is around 60 lakh. Okay. But your tax liability is 15 lakh. Tax liability is 15 lakh. That means after all this calculation, your tax liability is how much? 15 lakh. Okay. Then my surcharge, which is levied, surcharge. Let's say surcharge is levied. In India, surcharge will be levied on those whose income is above 50 lakh. Okay, so this surcharge will be levied on this 15 lakh and not on my 60 lakh. I think you got my point right. Okay, so here two things here. One, cess. Another one is surcharge. Both of them will not be shared by the center with the state. Okay. So if I talk about cess, you require an act of parliament. Act of parliament. And cess is for a specific purpose. Specific purpose. Okay, so for example, let's say education cess, 4% here on my income tax. Okay, so, or you can say GST compensation cess. I need an act there. Okay, so whatever cess we talk about, you require act of the parliament, and it is something like for a specific purpose. You're spending that money for that purpose only. If you're not able to spend it, then carry forward. Okay, so here that is for a specific purpose. Okay, and then another important observation here, cess is for everyone. And cess would be made part of the consolidated fund first, and then it will be pushed into that fund which is for the designated purpose. For example, education cess you have pushed in, goes into the consolidated fund, then shifted to Pradhamik Shiksha Kosh, primary education. So that will be in the public account. From there you will spend. Are you able to get this? But cess will not be shared by the center with the state. And this cess is in the income tax, this education cess, if I say education cess of 4%, is for everybody. It is not like the surcharge. But surcharge comes into picture only if your income crosses a certain limit. Suppose my income is 60 lakh, means on my 15 lakh, there will be an additional surcharge. Are you able to get this? Is that okay? So 15 lakh is the tax liability, 15 lakh plus surcharge of 10% on my 15 lakh, not on the 60. Is that okay? Understood? So, and after surcharge is levied, then cess will be levied. And let's say cess is levied 4%. So this cess will be levied on this value. If this is not there, then it is only levied on 15 It is a tax liability. If there is surcharge, it will be levied on both surcharge plus the tax liability. Is that okay? But cess is not for everybody, but surcharge is only for those who cross a particular level of income. Is that okay? And both cess and surcharge levied by the center is not shared with the state. Got the difference between cess and surcharge? Okay, fine. So that is one more observation. Okay, so progressive, regressive, digressive, and proportional. Okay, so here we have corporate tax, MAT, which is direct tax, 15% on book profits. Okay, so indirect taxes, earlier we had mod VAT. Okay, so mod VAT, man VAT, then mod VAT came in, manufacturing VAT, then came in sen VAT, and sen VAT was subsumed into CGST. Is that okay till there? Okay, there are two other methods of taxing. So one is we call it as ad valorem method of taxing and specific taxes. So ad valorem means you're taxing based on the value. Okay, so value. This specific tax is levied based on something like quantity of production, size, shape, etc. Cigarettes in India, lengthier the cigarette, higher is the tax. So that is basically a kind of a specific tax. Cars in India, SUVs, lengthier the car, there is a additional tax. Can both of them be levied together? Yes. Ad valorem and specific can be levied together. Suppose a car, you're levying a tax based on the value of the car, plus an additional extra tax if the car length crosses a particular limit. That means I can levy both ad valorem as well as specific taxes together. Is that okay? Ad valorem tax is a tax which is levied on the value of the product. For example, excise duty, 10% on the value of production. So what is that? That is nothing but ad valorem. Hope it is okay till there. Yes. This is a huge area. GST. Okay, every year up from 2017, there were one or the other question in prelims, simple questions only. But there was a very difficult question that was asked in CDS. Difficult is because there is no logic. Question becomes difficult when you can't use your brain. You should know the fact. Then only you can mark the answer. That is why it is difficult. Okay, so that is what I mean by a difficult question. Okay, so before I talk about GST, I want to show you that question here. You should be in a position to identify the number. Very difficult. But one thing is clear that UPSC is trying to increase the level. Otherwise, CDS and the question paper, especially history, though. History, it's not general knowledge. It is knowledge which we don't know. That is how the question paper was. Not so easy. You can go and check once and mug up the questions. If at all it comes up, you'll mark it. No, once you check it, it's better, right? See, we know about 0% slab. Okay. Then you know about 12, 5, 12, 18, 28. Okay. But unworked diamond is taxed at 0.25, additional, extra. Precious metals are taxed at a rate of 3% under GST, not 1. Under 3. That is the wrong statement. Is that okay? So that is why I said difficult, because you can't use any logic here. I don't think UPSC should be asking, but still you'll remember. Unworked diamond, 0.25. This is precious metals taxed at a rate of 1%. Earlier, civil services question was, which of the following are exempted from GST? That is, which of the following fall under 0%? He gave some chicken and eggs and processed fish. And like this. Why? Because that was a current affairs question where they have shifted the slab from 5% to 0 before the election period. Okay, so when they have shifted it from 5 to 0, there was a question that is framed now. That was the question basically. So that time they have asked. That means you have, but you should use logic. You can mark that question using logic. So GST, is it there on newspaper? You have GST on newspaper? On sale of newspaper? Advertisement is okay. Advertisement there will be. That means I'm putting an advertisement in newspaper. Will there be GST? Yes. On the advertisement, that fellow will, sorry, 18% de do. Okay, so that is there. But for newspaper sales specifically, with, so there's no GST. So that is how the question was asked earlier. Are you able to get this? Okay, so this is, don't worry about this question. It's only for information. So that such questions nobody will answer, so it's okay for us. We should not make mistakes with respect to those questions which everybody is answering. There we are gone. That is the problem with polity and economy. Polity and economy, there will be some easy questions. So out of 14, 8 to 9 will be easy. And 2, 3, because of your knowledge you may mark. And 1 or 2, because of God's grace you will mark. Okay, so that we will accept. But I should be intelligent enough in picking those 10 and marking them right. And that if you are making a mistake for polity and economy means 20 questions or at least 16 to 17 questions are gone. Then it will become difficult to get that cutoff. Because anyhow, ancient, medieval, of course, some may be really good, but on a general note, few may be really good, but still it is little difficult to get that. And there will be easy questions there also. So if I pick properly easy questions, and then I think 80, getting 80 should be possible. It should not be difficult. Actually, the easier the paper, more difficult. Because you're prepared properly. Since you're preparing, reading regularly, little difficulty, if it is there, it is better for you. If it is purely factual, these CDS fellows will crack it. SSC fellows will mark it. They'll not write the mains also. But they'll qualify the prelims. It's an easy paper. Easy paper. Because they already marked all the facts. And they'll be hitting 100. CSAT also. SSC means from daily morning you're doing maths only. So therefore you will clear that also. But you will not write mains. But your opportunity is gone. This is what is happening. Talented students are not clearing prelim. And that is the reason main scores will also fall. Forest service. Those who are read for forest are not clearing prelim. And those who are clearing forest service prelim is somebody who does not know what is the spelling of forest. And now they will start reading the new optional. I know my students only who took maths. Maths is one optional, anyhow it is there. They're very strong in maths. So anyhow you will get good score. And one other optional, English based. Write something. But somebody would have prepared 3 years for that, he's gone. Got the point, right? So this you should observe. So somehow we have to get through. That should be the approach. Somehow do whatever you want to do. Use any trick possible. Knowledge, is it important? No. Clearing the exam is important. I want to clear. Of course, knowledge is okay. Later also we will build it. Okay, but I want to clear it so that I'll get that opportunity to write. No, so that is important. Okay, fine. Knowledge is also important, not denying the fact. Okay, so here when we talk about GST, so I'll explain. Rather than the screen, it is easier for me to. So why GST? Because there were a lot of issues with respect to the earlier tax system. And that is the reason we have come up with GST. Okay, so some words. So questions can be on taxes subsumed under GST. Okay, so I'll show you that. Maybe after the break, we will see. Okay, taxes subsumed under GST. And then you know about the slabs. And 2 more things which you've seen, 0.25 and 3% precious metals. Okay, so 0, 5, 12, 18, and 28. Okay, and then GST compensation cess. GST compensation cess. Okay, so GST compensation. And then GST composition scheme. GST composition scheme. Okay, and then reverse charge concept under GST. Okay, what is this reverse charge in GST, etc. Then Article 246A, dual powers for center and state with respect to levying GST. And then you have 269A, which is the system which we call it as the IGST system. And then we have the 279A, which is about the GST Council. So in GST Council, quorum is 50%. Polity, you would have read it. Okay, and then center has 1/3 weight and states have 2/3. And overall, you have to get 75%, 3/4. Okay, so GST Council takes a lot of decisions, basically. GST Council will decide the slabs. GST Council will decide which item will go into which slab. Exemptions with respect to GST. Even now, are there exemptions with respect to GST? Yes, there are exemptions, right? Alcohol for human consumption, petroleum is also outside GST. Sale and consumption of electricity is outside GST. Okay, basic customs duty, GST. On securities, you don't have GST. On securities, we still pay STT. Security transaction tax, obvious that is. So you don't pay GST there. It is securities transaction tax which we pay, which is a direct tax. Okay, so road tax, road tax. Okay, before the vehicle is on the road, we pay it to the state, isn't it, separately? Okay, tolls also when you're moving. Okay, but octroi is included in SGST. Octroi is what? Entry tax. Entertainment tax, is it included in GST? Yes, it is included, except when it is levied by the local bodies. Is that okay? Except when levied by the local bodies. Lottery, is there tax on lottery? If you win a lottery, 1 crore, 30% straight will go. My friend has won a lottery. And when that money went off, I felt very happy. So, because I never won a lottery. This fellow is a very lucky fellow. Twice he has won. Once he won a car, and he has won 50 lakhs also once. So this is like the real luck, you call it as. And once the money comes in, you have to pay a tax. Remember, it's nothing like tax is not there. Okay, so fine, come there. Exemptions, exemption is different from. So exemption means if 5 petroleum products are exempted, means 5 petroleum products are exempted means the earlier system is followed. That is, excise duty on petroleum products will be levied by center, and the sales tax on these 5 petroleum products will be levied by the state. Is that okay? So exemptions. And National Anti-Profiteering Authority. National Anti-Profiteering Authority. So this particular authority will prevent what? Profiteering, right? Okay, so these are the some areas where there can be some question. Areas where there can be a question. Okay, so I think we'll observe that. Something like a jackpot question, we will anyhow mark it. So there should not be any trouble. Everybody will mark it. So there is no problem there. Okay, so GST network is an IT infrastructure for implementing GST, right? It is completely, it is government entity, but non-profit. Okay, government. So center and state government have equal share. Okay, so here, this is GST network. Okay, then e-way bills. E-way bills, heard of e-way bills? So e-way bills under GST, okay, so will help in logistic efficiency. Logistics efficiency, right? Okay, in the central government, basically at the central level, excise duties, additional excise duties, service tax, countervailing duties, special additional duties on customs, all are subsumed. Is that okay? State level entertainment, except of course, when levied by the local. Okay, octroi, purchase tax, luxury, taxes on lottery, gambling, entertainment, these are all subsumed. State VAT, obviously it is also subsumed in GST. Is that okay? Whenever there is interstate trade, okay, so whenever there is interstate trade, you have what? IGST, isn't it? So earlier there was something like a CST system. CST is what? Central Sales Tax. So whenever there is to be a trade, let's say there's a trade between Delhi, from Delhi to Maharashtra. Okay, so earlier there used to be CST, Central Sales Tax, because interstate trade is part of Article 269. Article 269. So these are taxes levied by the center, but the money that was collected was given to the exporter state. So the money was going to Delhi, or it is something like here, the money goes to this state which is exporting. Okay, so we'll put Maharashtra here and Arunachal Pradesh here. Okay, so why? Because the developed states were benefiting because of CST. Developed states were benefiting because of CST revenue. So CST is also called as a origin-based tax. Origin-based tax. Why origin? Because the revenue is also coming to that state where the product has been originated or manufactured. So now, through 101st constitutional amendment, you don't have CST anymore. This is replaced by a system, which is IGST. So instead of 269, now it is 269A, which is about IGST system. Is that okay? So IGST, Article 269A says that IGST will be levied by center, because anything with respect to interstate trade, the levy powers would be with center, levied by center. Okay. That means what is this IGST? It is nothing but CGST plus SGST together. So let's say it is 5%. So this 5% will be levied by the center, IGST. And that revenue which is collected, some portion of it, 2.5, will be taken by Modi ji. Remaining 2.5 will go to the importer state or Arunachal Pradesh. Consumption-based GST model. So we adopted dual GST, like the Canadian model, and we have adopted a consumption-based GST model. So the money which is SGST portion of the money is going to whom? Arunachal or the importer state. Is that okay? Understood? Yes. Okay, so 269A talks about, see, three things here. IGST, the levy is done by center, administered by center. IGST is administered by center. The revenue sharing with respect to IGST is decided by GST Council. This is also given in the article itself. The revenue sharing mechanism of IGST proceeds is decided through what? GST Council. Is that okay? That is one. Third, IGST sharing happens outside the consolidated fund. That means that the money which is collected, IGST will not be pushed into consolidated fund of India, nor the consolidated fund of state initially. Why? Because you have to share that money with Arunachal. Again, Act of Parliament and all that is headache. So the revenue sharing in IGST happens outside the consolidated fund. This is what the Article 269A says. Is that okay? Understood? Levied by center, sharing outside, and the proceeds are going to Arunachal. So the developed states are not happy. Maharashtra is not happy because earlier they used to receive CST and therefore they were protesting, obviously. And that is the reason government decided to come up with GST compensation cess. Separate act is there for levying GST compensation cess. Is that okay? Is it levied on all the items? No. If you open the website of the government and look into the list, you will find all tobacco, pan. And then again, chewable tobacco. It goes like that. Okay, if you see the list. But again, on some automobiles, for example, motorcycles above 350cc. Are you able to get this? So that means even on automobiles, do you have GST compensation cess? Yes. Additional. So on luxury items and sin goods like tobacco, okay, so you will have compensation cess. So for 5 years after implementation of GST, 17 to 2022, but again, still the procedure continues now. Okay, so is this clear? Understood? Okay, so I don't think a difficult question will be asked here because IGST and all, if at all they ask, you should be in a position to mark it. So this is about council. I'll give you break, wait. So, after the break, we'll do the budget part. See, this is like, afterwards you should only be in a position to revise current affair and solve more questions. If you read yesterday and come today, then probably that is the objective. Again, I'll read only current affairs and solve more questions. I'm ready with the rest of the things. So you'll revise your notes. or whatever you have read already. Okay, so see here, you know about capital gains tax already. Transfer pricing. What is transfer pricing? It's a pricing mechanism between two known entities. Okay, known entities, right? And transfer pricing has to be replaced with arm's length price. Transfer pricing should be replaced with arm's length price. Arm's length price, in the earlier budgets, they were using this word. Okay, arm's length price. So some words like equalization levy, global minimum tax. Okay, global minimum tax. Okay, so arm's length pricing means you're taking the other party as the same entity. Other party, you're taking the other party as the different entity. So that means Vodafone India and Vodafone Mauritius, they are selling, but you're taking it as a different entity. So this is, transfer pricing may lead to base erosion and profit shifting. You're shifting profits from a country where the tax rates are high to a country where the tax rates are low. Is that okay? Base erosion and profit shifting. Okay. Is there any difference between TDS and TCS? Tax deducted at source as tax collected at source. Okay. So you'll check that also. Tax TDS and TCS, tax collected at source. Okay. So three concepts. One is Laffer curve. Laffer curve talks about a relationship between tax rate and tax revenue. Okay, so tax rate and tax revenue. Okay, so is that okay? So optimum rate is the rate at which I'm receiving maximum revenue. Then we talk about tax to GDP ratio. Tax to GDP ratio, suppose in the interim budget, if we are saying 11.7%, which is way below the OECD countries and other countries. So we are very bad. They are around 30%, etc. And our tax to GDP is very bad. This is something which you remember. And increase in tax to GDP ratio may indicate that the economy is growing. Previous UPSC question. It's an indicator that it's a growing economy. But it will not indicate anything with respect to equitable distribution of wealth. It will not indicate anything with respect to equitable distribution of wealth, because the top 5% are paying the maximum taxes. Then I can't comment anything with respect to equitable distribution of wealth. Is that okay? Then tax buoyancy. Tax buoyancy. It is the proportionate change in tax revenue. Tax revenue to proportionate change in GDP. Both are different. This is different, this is different actually. Both are different. This I'm comparing to different years, 2018, 19, 20. When I'm comparing, that is when you come across buoyancy. Okay, so proportionate change in tax revenue to proportionate change in tax GDP. So it indicates how responsive my tax collection is with respect to change in GDP. Okay, but this proportionate change in tax revenue can be with respect to automatic change. Normally it is increasing, or it can be because of some discretionary changes. So discretionary change means what? Discretionary change is something like GST 2017. You have come up with GST. It's a discretionary change. Revenue would have increased because of a discretionary change. Both are there when I'm talking about buoyancy. Is that okay? Okay, discretionary change can be change with respect to the tax base also. For example, you're coming up with negative list with respect to service tax. Negative list, service tax, negative list came up in 2011-12. Okay, so your base is increasing. So it's a discretionary change. Okay, so this is different from tax elasticity. So tax elasticity can be looked at from the proportionate change in tax revenue to proportionate change in base. Now, don't get confused. So this base can be anything. This base can be GDP. That means I'm comparing with GDP. Or this base can also be tax rate. So in the textbooks, they have written the proportionate change in tax revenue to the change in tax rate. So that is tax elasticity. But it's only partial, but it's okay. So proportionate change in tax revenue to the change in tax rate. That is what? Tax elasticity. But that base can be GDP also. It need not be only tax rate. Are you able to get this? Okay, so if it is rate is given, it can't be buoyancy. It has to be elasticity. Is that okay? And here, but when I talk about change in tax revenue, this change in tax revenue will only include automatic change. There will not be any discretionary change. No discretionary change. So tax revenue is increasing. In buoyancy, you take both automatic plus discretionary. Here, you will not take the discretionary. That means because of GST, the tax revenue has increased by 100 rupee. Overall tax revenue increased by 200. 100 is automatic and 100 was because of GST. This I will not consider. This is discretionary change. I will only take that 100 when I'm calculating elasticity. Is that okay? Suppose a statement comes up, proportionate change in tax revenue to the change in tax rate. That means it is about elasticity. Okay, proportionate change in tax revenues to GDP, where you're only taking the automatic change, no discretionary change. That is also elasticity. Is that okay? Understood? The words are clear? Okay, so elasticity, Laffer, buoyancy, tax to GDP. Now, direct taxes, if I observe last 5 years, direct taxes, the tax revenues are increasing. Last 3 years, yes. But tax buoyancy of direct taxes is continuously increasing. Wrong statement. Tax buoyancy of direct taxes is continuously increasing. Wrong statement. Buoyancy is not increasing. If you compare last year with this year, my buoyancy with respect to direct taxes is falling, though my tax collection is increasing. The proportionate change in tax revenue to proportionate change in GDP is not increasing, it is falling. COVID year, we did not calculate buoyancy only. We did not calculate. You can check the data. Is that okay? So that much, I think, is more than sufficient. Any question they ask, you should be in a position of marking it. So elasticity, buoyancy, the words are clear. Transfer pricing, pricing mechanism between two known entities. Base erosion and profit shifting. Okay. Tax haven. Pigovian tax is imposed on commodities which have negative externality. Pollution, all that. Okay, so some words here. Sin tax, tax to GDP. Tax avoidance and tax evasion. Avoidance is you're using the loopholes in the system. Loopholes in the system to not pay the tax. That is called as avoidance. It is legal. It is legal. Evasion is illegal. Avoidance is legal. Okay. So trend-based questions UPSC stopped asking. Why? Because COVID is there. So obviously tax revenues have fallen during COVID. And after that, again, the tax revenue slowly started increasing. That is the reason no question you find like last 5 years, what is happening. Otherwise, if you see 2016, there were questions like fiscal deficit was continuously increasing since last 5 years. Tax to GDP ratio was continuously increasing since last 5 years. So generally, tax to GDP will not continuously increase because that percentage number, no, 11.6, 11.7. Is that okay? You can't take any, I think you can't take more. Take a break. Okay, shall we start? So the word budget is not there. We have something like the annual financial statement. Okay, you know this already, Article 112. Okay, so whenever government is coming up with framing the budget, it has the data, 3 datas that are available. So this is you're coming up with a budgetary estimate of the upcoming year, isn't it? So you're coming up with a budget for the next year, estimate for the next year. Okay, so you will have the revised estimate of the current year, budgetary estimate of the current year, and you'll also have the actuals of the before last year. Is that okay? Actuals of the before last year. I'm not writing it because I think you should be knowing it. Is that okay? If there's a problem, you tell me, I'll write it. Okay. Is that okay? Yes. Right. So whenever we talk about the revenues, so today when we talk about budget, we have removed something like planned and non-planned expenditures, developmental and non-developmental. Both are removed. So therefore, we have only 2 things. One is the revenue budget and another one is the capital budget. So when we talk about the budget, we talk about two things here. One is the receipts and another one is the expenditure. Okay, receipts are different from revenues, isn't it? Okay, so something like all revenues are receipts, but all receipts need not be revenues. All receipts need not be revenues. For example, loans. Loans can be seen as part of receipt, but that loan need not be a revenue, right? But tax is always a part of the revenue as well as incoming money. So here receipt is something like incoming and this is outgoing. I hope it is clear. Okay, so here when we talk about receipts, all recurring receipts, we call them as the revenue receipts. And then we have capital receipts. So capital receipts are those receipts which either reduce the assets or increase the liabilities of the government. Okay. Now the question comes up, government raising money through G-Secs, where will it go? Capital receipt, it is nothing but borrowing. Government is borrowing using G-Secs or treasury bills, etc. So earlier there was a question, which of the following is not a non-financial debt? Which of the following is non-financial debt? And he gave credit card borrowings, he gave treasury bills, etc. Non-financial is something like other than the financial institutions. Individuals are borrowing credit card other than the financial institutions. Okay, treasury bill, government is borrowing other than the financial institutions. That was a simple question that was asked. So capital receipts will include what? It can include loans taken. Okay, it includes loans recovered. Is that okay? And then disinvestments, proceeds. I hope it is clear. Okay, so loans taken, liability is increasing. Loans recovered, asset is decreasing. Is that okay? Earlier this was an asset which was giving me regular return. Disinvestment, asset is decreasing. Okay, so this is a debt creating capital receipt. This is nothing but the borrowings, or I call it as a debt creating capital receipt. I hope this is clear. Okay, and these are non-debt creating capital receipts. Non-debt creating capital receipts. Is that okay? Yes. So here in the revenue receipts, we have two things. One, tax, and another one is the non-tax. Okay. So in the tax source, we can bifurcate it into direct taxes and indirect taxes. Now, non-tax revenue receipts for the government. Okay, so you have profits of PSUs. Okay, interest received, gifts received, grants received, etc. All that. Okay. RBI? Okay, RBI transfers, all that. So, auctions of 5G. Auctions of 5G, the revenue which the government gets is also a non-tax revenue receipt. Okay, non-tax revenue receipts. Other things are simple only. Okay, so it includes profits of PSUs, interests, okay, or the receipts generated on general services, social services, economic services, general receipts generated, incoming money. So receipts generated on health and education, okay, or economic services like transportation, etc. All this. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so now when we talk about the expenditure side, you have the revenue expenditures and capital expenditure. So revenue expenditure is seen as futile expenditure, useless because it's not leading to any creation of assets. That is what is revenue. So day-to-day activities, you're spending money. So out of all the revenue expenditure, major chunk of money is going into interest payments. That is what you have seen there, 20% in that slide. Okay, so that is the slide from the Interim budget only. So interest payment is a major chunk of all the revenue expenditures. So you have defense, subsidies, salaries and pension. What else? Grants given. Okay, all this postal deficit, all that will be part of my revenue expenditure. I think there's no confusion there with respect to revenue expenditures. Capital expenditure is all that expenditure which will either increase assets or reduce liability. So it includes loans repaid, loans given, loans and advances given. Loans given means asset is increasing. Loan repaid means liability is decreasing. Is that okay? Money spent on infrastructure. It is something like expenditure on both physical as well as financial assets. So government is buying some bonds or shares also. Can be seen as a capital expenditure. But government is issuing bonds. That will go into my capital receipts. Issuing bonds. Issuing bond means government is borrowing. So borrowings will be part of my capital receipts. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So, but if you are buying any machinery, defense equipment, etc. So defense generally is part of revenue expenditure. But if you're buying some equipment or machine, anti-tank missiles, etc., that will be part of my capital expenditure. Okay. So earlier they used to ask which one will fall where. Now they're not asking. Okay. So nowadays they're not asking. So we don't know whether they will ask or not. But they may ask. Is that okay? Yes. Then when we talk about the most dangerous form of deficit is the revenue deficit. This is seen as the most dangerous form of deficit. It is the revenue expenditure minus the revenue receipts. Dangerous. Because that means there is a deficit for day-to-day activities, number one. And there is also a problem here that revenue deficit increases means it may deplete your existing asset or increase your existing liability. It may decrease. I think you should be knowing that. Okay, so to bridge this, I use my capital receipts. So when I use my capital receipts, it will increase my liability. Either I borrow or I disinvest. Is that okay? Understood? Okay, so this is most dangerous form of deficit. Then we have effective revenue deficit, which is revenue deficit minus grants given by central government to states and UTs for capital purpose. So FRBM Amendment 2012, through FRBM Amendment 2012, you have come up with effective revenue deficit. So earlier it was not there. So it has come up later after 2011. Okay, so then budgetary deficit, it is nothing but total expenditure minus the total receipts. You're not using this as a criteria now because you're making the total expenditure same as the total receipts. Okay, so then comes fiscal deficit or the gross fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit is equal to BD plus borrowings. If you find this in the answer, this is also okay. Not get confused. In CAPF, there was this statement which says BD plus borrowing. So don't get confused. Since you're making your BD 0, this you're making it 0. Okay, so therefore, my FD will be nothing but the total borrowings. So FRBM was talking about something like measuring all these deficits as a percentage of GDP. For example, Madam recently in the interim budget said next year my FD will come down to 5.1% of GDP. So election year generally FD should increase, but rather the FD is coming down. And when she made the budget announcement, the government bond yields decreased in the market. Budget announcement made and she said FD will come down to 5.1%. And immediately once this announcement was made, the bond yields, GSEC yields in the market have reduced. Okay, so what does it mean? It is something like government is saying, Madam is saying I will not borrow much next year. That means I will not issue much of GSEC next year. So therefore, existing GSECs will have more demand. So therefore, existing GSECs had more demand means price increase, bond prices. And bond price is inversely related to bond yield. Therefore, yield decreased. don't worry about price and yield. In tomorrow's class, we can discuss. But madam, when she announced the budget, you find that the bond yields of the government bonds started dropping because of that reason, because government is indicating that I will borrow less next year. Good or bad means we can't say. We'll talk about that later. So now the question comes up, is FD always bad for the economy? FD is not always bad for the economy. This is what you should understand. FD is not always bad for the economy. FD is good because FD includes my RD also. See, if I break this down. So if I have to break this down, I can break it as TE minus TR. Can I break it that way? Okay. So then plus, let's say if I talk about borrowings, etc. So here if I see TE is, again, I have RE plus CE. And TR, I have RR and CR, both. Okay. So here I can also write it as RE minus RR plus CE minus CR. Okay. So RE minus RR is again what? RD. That means RD is also there in my, I'm using it for RD. In this RD, again, most of the money is going for, in this RD, I'm using, most of the money is going for what? Interest payment. That means you're taking new loan, you're taking a new credit card to pay your previous credit card bill. That is what is the meaning, basically. Interest payments, no. So is that okay? Understood. So FD, is it always bad? No, FD is not bad provided my FD is leading to creation of asset. Now the question is there any difference between FD and public debt? Okay, so public debt. Now this is in news. I expect a question this year on this topic, which is government debt. It can be done in our external sector class also. So FD is something like a flow concept. Because FD, I'm talking about the borrowings of the government in one financial year. Is that okay? Public debt is something like a stock. I'm measuring it at a certain point of time. Overall debt of the government. Today, the overall debt of the government can be different from the overall debt of the government tomorrow. Suppose government pays 50% of its debt today. And tomorrow, if I ask you what is the public debt of India, then automatically the debt is going to change. That means public debt is measured can be measured at a certain point of time. Is that okay? For example, if I say balance sheet of a company is flow or is it a stock? No, not flow. It is a stock kind of concept. Why? Because balance sheet is something like up to a certain period. If I ask, is that okay? So balance sheet is not from to. Never balance sheet is from this point to this period. Balance sheet is always up to March 31st, 2024. So Vision IAS balance sheet up to March 31st, 2024. From the beginning. Now, are you able to get this? Okay, so it is up to at that point. Okay, so the assets and balance sheet will always talk about asset and liability. So Vision IAS, suppose you are borrowing more today, then automatically there will be a difference in the sheet. Or I've paid my loans off, then automatically my balance sheet shows a different number altogether. Is that okay? So balance sheet is something like what concept? Stock, kind of a stock. Profit and loss of a company, account of a company will be a flow concept, because profit and loss account is always from this period to this period. How much profit did the company make? How much loss did the company make? Similarly, public debt is up to. Government debt would have accumulated over a period of time. So today, what is the public debt? So IMF said, government, India, your general debt is almost like more than 80%. General debt means what? Both center, state, plus UTs put together. More than 81%, 81. Not good for you. You can't say, okay, US has a higher debt than India, so it is okay. I'll come to that later. But public debt is something like stock. Okay, so this you are measuring as what? Debt to GDP ratio. So you're saying debt to GDP, you're touching 82%. Both center, 82 is what? Center plus state plus UT. I'm not talking about only center. Is that okay? Only center is around 59. I'll show you the graph. Is that okay? Yes, but this you're saying, I will reach 5.1, reach, of course. This is an interim budget. Madam was saying 5.1% of GDP. This is for 2024-25. Is that okay? This is for 2024-25, that year, right? Okay, so that is the basic difference. Then when I say net fiscal deficit is what? Fiscal deficit minus loans given. Loans given, but generally we talk about gross. Okay, so is that okay till there? Then primary deficit, there's another deficit which we use, primary deficit. So primary deficit is equal to FD minus interest payments. FD minus interest payments. These are formulae. And nothing to worry. FD, you should be, if you know the formula, you can identify the options. Except for the trend-based question. Trend-based, they're not asking. Of course, FD, government is reducing it since last 3 years, you can observe. Government is doing a good job in terms of reducing the fiscal deficits and the revenue deficits, no doubt about it. Okay, so these are some of the deficits. Now, FRBM Act 2003, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003. That means you're coming up with a legal backup to keep the deficits under control. Okay, so FRBM Act 2003. So the crux of FRBM is something like, see, one of the important aspects it says, by 2008-9, okay, so RD should become 0 and FD should become 3%. What does it mean? In my FD is allowed. FD, you are allowing FD. So that means you can borrow, but my borrowing, I will use it only for my capital expenditure. This is the crux of FRBM. See, RD is made 0 and FD is 3 means what? I am borrowing and my borrowing will be used only for infrastructure. That is what is the observation or a crux of my FRBM. It's not that borrowing is bad. FRBM does not say borrowing is bad. FRBM says you are borrowing for infrastructure or convert your RE, revenue expenditures, into capital expenditure. That is why RD is 0 and FD is 3%. Is that okay? So FD is not always bad. Clear? And FRBM also talks about reducing contingent liabilities. Contingent liability should not be more than 0.5% of GDP. Okay, so more than from what you have thought. So contingent liability is something like future liability. It is contingent upon some happening of a future event. For example, let's say Tatas are fighting a court case. If they lose the case, they have to pay, let's say, 4,000 crores. That is their contingent liability. It is contingent upon a future event. That future event is Tata's losing a case in the court. So today that may not be looking as a liability, but it may become a liability in future. Are you able to get this? So is there, he may not ask what is a contingent liability, but is contingent liability restrictions there in FRBM? Yes. That is what you should know. And RBI should not subscribe to GSEC. That means government should not borrow directly from RBI using its GSECs from 2006 onwards. Is that okay? So RBI should not directly subscribe to GSEC. That means RBI should not directly give loans to government. Okay. Did we reach the targets? We failed in terms of reaching the target. What is the reason if they ask? The reason is global financial crisis. Global financial crisis, subprime crisis. Therefore, we could not reach the targets. We went ahead with fiscal stimulus. Because there are certain conditions under which you need not reach the target. But the word escape clause is not mentioned in the FRBM. Though that means that word escape clause is what? Escaping from reaching the target. So that escape clause is not mentioned. The word as such is not mentioned in the earlier FRBM Act. It was clearly mentioned in the N.K. Singh Committee recommendations, 2016. Is that okay? N.K. Singh is called as FRBM 2, Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Review Committee. Recently, there were some articles in the newspaper. N.K. Singh was also talking about something like about FD and all that. He says FD is not bad. Okay, and all that. Okay, so, but not in this discussion. Till here, is it okay? Understood this? Okay, so here we could not reach the targets. Then there were amendments made, 2012, 2015, amendments made, and we were postponing it. So subsequently in the amendments, we have done few things. So what we have done, along with the budget, there are other documents which have to be placed along with the budget. So that was also added through FRBM amendment. So this was a prelims question. Medium term fiscal policy statement. Okay, introduced through was the question. And options are given, and one option is FRBM. Is that okay? Yes, we'll come to that. I'll show you the slide. Till here, is it okay? We can't reduce the speed. We can't reduce the speed. Okay, so that any doubt is there, you can come after the class. Otherwise, we can't revise. Okay, so I think this should be okay, contingent RBI. Okay, now here, 2012-15, then 2016, encasing committee recommendations. I'll show you the data later. This is from the interim budget. You know what is a surplus budget, deficit budget, okay, balance budget. UPSC will never ask. Okay, so we know this, therefore, you know it, so, right? So balance, such questions will not be asked. Okay, so, but you should know what it is. Okay, revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, effective revenue deficit, and primary deficit. Previous UPSC question only. Simple question. Fiscal stimulus. That's it. So which one looks fiscal stimulus there? That is the answer. B is the answer, right? Yes. But now UPSC, I don't know. They're not asking. Last year they did not ask, but this again the next, we don't know what they do. Okay, 1 second. So this is about encasing committee recommendations. Okay, so encasing primarily talks about debt to GDP. So he's not much focused on FDs and RDs. So he says debt as the primary indicator, main indicator. And your debt to GDP, he suggests, of course, he was suggesting when it was 72%, he said debt to GDP should become 60% of GDP. 60% of GDP, center should be 40 and states should be 20. Okay, so currently it is not like that. Center itself is close to 60. Center itself is close to 60 currently. Good or bad, you can see here. This is a central government. So post-pandemic, debt jumped post-pandemic. Okay, so debt jumped post-pandemic. So this green one is the center's gross debt to GDP. Center's gross debt to GDP. You can see it is close to 59% of GDP. Center itself. So center should be 40, right? Okay, but centers is something like almost like, okay, so total debt in lakh crores, that is the amount there. Total debt in lakh crores here, you can see there. Okay, is that okay? Yes. After COVID, obviously it has increased, no doubt. Now here, this is India's gross debt is set to cross 80%. This is what IMF was saying, India, be careful. Then we said, IMF, you keep quiet. We know what we are doing. You don't tell us. Okay, so 83, it went up to 83% in 2021 almost like. Is that okay? And now somebody was saying, oh, US 132, so what is the problem? You should not compare with US. Suppose I can't compare with Ambani, right? So similarly, you should not compare with US. Why? Because if a country is borrowing more, so for example, Ambani is borrowing more than me. Ambani's debt may be 250% of his income. My debt is 50% of my income. Which is more risky? This is more risky. Because he is more capable. Are you able to get this? Because he has more assets. He has more assets. So similarly, if you are borrowing, one important observation, you can't compare with Japan, you can't compare with US and say my debt is okay. So that's a wrong comparison. Advanced economies, if they have, see, whenever I borrow, it should do three things. One, you should give me infrastructure. Which infrastructure? Education. Second, you should give me health infrastructure. Or you should give me jobs. Or you should give me infrastructure like economic infrastructure, road, which is all there in US. So this is what this infrastructure is nothing but GFCF. So debt is increasing. Along with debt, if gross fixed capital formation is increasing, it is okay. But if GFCF is not increasing and debt is increasing, GFCF of US is high. Road, infrastructure, health infrastructure, education infrastructure. India's case, not much. This is worse. Here there is trouble. This we are doing something now. And even job also is not there. Therefore, how do you say happiness? Education is not there, health is not there, job is not there. What should I do with infrastructure? Okay, it's okay. But this is also required. But these three are very important. I want these three. You give me these three, you're increasing debt. Your increased debt is leading to these. Then it's okay. It is leading to GFCF, it is okay. Gross fixed capital. So that is why don't compare with the developed world. I think you got the point, right? Okay, so yes. Use debt as a primary target of the fiscal policy. This is what N.K. Singh was saying. Next, he says, come up with a fiscal council. Create an autonomous fiscal council with a chairperson and 2 members appointed by the center. Okay. Then deviation. Escape clause is clearly mentioned in the N.K. Singh. Of course, escape clause indirectly was followed in the FRBM. For example, global financial crisis, we did not reach the targets. That was escaping from reaching the target. But there, the word escape clause was introduced through N.K. Singh. So there were clear specifications mentioned under which you can escape from reaching your FD targets. So for example, national calamity or national security related issues, war is one aspect. Structural reforms. Okay, you're coming up with structural reforms, you can go ahead. Agriculture is not doing well, then you can escape from reaching the target. That means government is spending more from its pocket. Or your real GDP growth is less than the average of last 4 quarters. Is that okay? Then also you can go ahead with escape clause. But your escape should be up to a maximum of 0.5% of GDP. That means your target is 4, FD target is 4% of GDP. You can go up to 4.5% of GDP. That is, you can escape. So that is something that is also there. So is that clear? Understood? Okay, so encasing can be a question anytime. Encasing can be a question anytime. It can come up as a factual statement anytime. Objectives of fiscal policy. Okay, sometimes it comes as an option, and you should know full employment, price stability, growth, and development, both growth and development. Okay, so these are. So fiscal policy plays a critical role in capital formation, both in public and private sector. 2 days back, IMF report, I think yesterday's newspaper, it says public investment is playing a critical role. This is the article. Public investment means government's investment. That is what I was worried. Madam is saying I will not spend next year. If madam spends, then only it is good. If private fellow is not spending, government is also not spending. Okay, so somebody has to spend, no, so that we will get something. So if you spend, companies will do well. Companies do well, we can invest and make money. If nobody is spending, then you can't, companies will not do well. And therefore, you are also not going to do well. Of course, it's on the other side. But remember, fiscal deficit should be under control. FD should be under control. Okay, so that 3% target, but now you are not talking about 3 because during COVID, FD went up to 9.1. Is that okay? Yes. This is all English statements which you can mark. So there's no tension only. You see here, like provides stimulus to increase the savings rate automatically. More fiscal stimulus, then automatically you will have more money in hand. More money in hand, you can save more. So these things, there's no trouble. You can definitely mark. That's the reason. So major sources of revenue, obviously tax is one of the most important source of revenue. Okay. So sometimes there is question like deficit financing. Okay. So deficit financing is a mechanism of bridging deficits. Bridging deficits. What is the last thing you can do to bridge the deficit? It is monetized deficit. That is RBI minting money and giving. That will be inflationary. Is that okay? That will be inflationary. So that is the last thing we can do when it comes to deficit financing. So deficit financing can be done through internal means as well as external means, isn't it? So internally, government can borrow through marketable instruments or non-marketable instruments. Okay. Externally, government can borrow from international institutions. Okay. So now there were statements in the exam when it comes to external debt. So suppose I give you these statements. Internal debt of the government is obviously more than the external debt. Statement is right. Internal debt is more than external debt. Out of the total debt, out of the total external debt, sovereign debt is less than non-sovereign debt. Is the statement right or no? Out of the total external debt, sovereign debt is less than non-sovereign. Sovereign means government. Non-sovereign is non-government. So out of the total external debt, obviously, non-sovereign debt is more than the sovereign debt. Non-sovereign, why? Because out of the total external debt, maximum external debt is in the form of ECB. External commercial borrowing, followed by NRI deposit. Is that okay? So there can be statements like that. Internal debt, external debt. That is one. Okay. Sovereign debt, non-sovereign debt. Okay. Earlier there was a question, all of our external debt is in dollars. Similar question came in CDS 2024. A difficult question, obviously. I've not put that. I'll put it in the external sector class. Okay. So all our external debt is in dollars. Wrong. Around 55% is in dollar, followed by rupee. Followed by rupee. We are borrowing. So FIs are putting their money into bonds, etc. Okay, that is also debt. Is that okay? Yes. If there are any questions, we will solve. This is okay. How many of you have checked the material before coming, at least tried checking? No. Okay. Others you would have thought like you can manage straight. Why to check? So directly in the class. Okay. You done something, right? Okay. See, it is better if you check, because then automatically our revision will be over properly. Otherwise, you will find that we are jumping. Okay, so if you have not read, you forgot what is FD. So got the point. It happens, no, because you're studying it for the first time. So obviously you may forget what is fiscal deficit, what is revenue deficit, what is effective revenue deficit. Okay, so 1 second. I was just checking what is there. I don't know what is there. One minute. External sector, money market and capital market, poverty and inequality. These are the three areas. External sector, money market, poverty and inequality. Read the static part, and later you can only revise current. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.